Olivia Carter smiled faintly, taking a sip of wine, and looked at the masked man. Do you believe in platonic friendships between men and women? Perhaps because the masked man reminded her so much of a close friend from her modern life, Olivia Carter couldn't help but ask, genuinely curious about his answer. The masked man looked at Olivia Carter, pondered for a long moment, and finally spoke, Your question isn't absolute. Olivia Carter smiled faintly, Why do you say that? The masked man set down his glass, his gaze serious. Affection is shaped by many factors. Initial feelings can shift with time and events. Preconceived notions about a relationship can unconsciously bias your perceptions, regardless of what truly transpires. Perhaps reality has diverged from your expectations, and your heart has already made a choice you haven't acknowledged. Thus, many fated connections are missed. Olivia Carter listened intently, then suddenly clapped her hands in appreciation, a hint of empathy in her voice. You've summarized it perfectly. I think the same, just couldn't articulate it as well. The masked man raised an eyebrow slightly, smiling, I'm merely stating the truth. Olivia Carter's curiosity was piqued. It sounds like you've experienced a great deal of this yourself. Otherwise, how could you be so insightful? This question delved a bit deeper. The masked man calmly looked at Olivia Carter, teasing, Are you trying to pry into my past? Olivia Carter, realizing her misstep, quickly waved her hand dismissively, feigning indifference. It was just a casual question, nothing more. The masked man didn't answer, instead posing his own question with a touch of curiosity. Actually, I've been meaning to ask you something. Olivia Carter took another sip of her drink. Are you curious about the change in the Carter family's third miss? Wherever the emperor set foot, everyone knew of the foolish and naive third miss of the Carter family. This man before her was surely no exception. The masked man smiled and shook his head. Heaven has truly favored you, bestowing both beauty and intellect. I find this perfectly reasonable. Otherwise, wouldn't such a beautiful appearance be wasted? Olivia Carter finished his sentence as soon as he paused. The masked man was taken aback, surprised by their shared perspective. He nodded and raised his glass in a toast. Don't mind me, just a personal opinion. Olivia Carter didn't hesitate, clinking her glass against his and draining it. She shrugged, no offense taken. I agree. Having come to this world, and possessing such clarity, why not live joyfully? That's precisely what intrigues me. The masked man seized on her words. Debauchery among the offspring of officials and nobles is common, but a young lady like yourself is a first for me. Olivia Carter disagreed, countering with a question, and what do you think? The masked man smiled gently, his gaze fixed on Olivia Carter. I think you live more authentically and freely than other noblewomen, unrestrained and liberated. This is the life you desire, isn't it? Olivia Carter nodded, unexpectedly. You understand me quite well. It's not understanding, but rather that we aspire to the same kind of life. Olivia Carter scoffed, her face flushed like a night blooming serious. Pointing at the masked man, she said, Don't tell me you wear a mask because that's your true self, and when you take it off, you're putting on the mask of everyday life. That must be truly agonizing. Undisguised astonishment flickered in the masked man's eyes. Olivia Carter had claimed he understood her, but now it seemed she was the one who truly understood him. Olivia Carter continued, In life, we all wear different masks, depending on who we're with. Where there are people, there are masks. True freedom, true joy, simply doesn't exist. Her words, though melancholic, rang true. The masked man took the wineglass from Olivia Carter's hand, advising, You should drink less. Who knows what you'll face when you return to Carter Estate. His words jolted Olivia Carter. Patting her flushed cheeks, she straightened up and apologized with a smile, My apologies. I'm not usually one for drinking, yet I seem to have overindulged. Solicitous, the masked man gestured for a pot of tea. Pouring a cup for Olivia Carter, he placed it before her and said gently, It's all right. Keeping things bottled up is never good. Olivia Carter reached for the teacup, then paused, looking at the masked man. Am I that transparent? You see right through me. The corners of the masked man's eyes crinkled in a smile tinged with bitterness. Fighting offers only momentary satisfaction. It doesn't solve the real problem. He was alluding to Olivia Carter's earlier distress. The feeling of being instantly seen through irritated Olivia Carter. Her displeasure was evident. She drained her teacup and said sullenly, "Are you always this blunt?" Hearing the reproach in her voice, the masked man didn't answer but instead probed further. "I saw you alight from the prince's carriage. Did the third prince, Richard Lancaster, upset you?" His direct question left Olivia Carter nowhere to hide. She retorted sarcastically. "I thought you were different, that you wouldn't pry into my personal affairs. But it seems you're just bored and I'm your amusement." The masked man remained calm. His voice serious, he looked directly into Olivia Carter's eyes. "Whether I'm teasing you or not, you know best." Olivia Carter glared at him. "You and Richard Lancaster are equally detestable." Finally, the third prince was mentioned. The masked man, seemingly intrigued by the topic, couldn't resist asking, "From what I understand, the third prince, despite his physical limitations, is kind-hearted, uninterested in vying for power, honest, and simple. He doesn't seem like someone who would upset you." Fueled by the alcohol, Olivia Carter misunderstood him. Pointing at herself, she asked, "Are you saying I'm judging him unfairly?" The masked man hastily shook his head. "That wasn't my intention. I just can't believe someone with the third prince's personality could provoke your ire. Furthermore." He paused, seemingly weighing his words, then looked at Olivia Carter and continued, "He's the man you're going to marry soon." Olivia Carter scoffed, looking at the masked man. "What if I told you it's precisely his personality that irks me?" Seeing the anticipated look of surprise on the masked man's face, Olivia Carter propped her head up with one hand, tapped rhythmically on the table with the other, and gazed into the distance. "The third prince is physically flawed, but he's still of royal blood. He shouldn't lack status or honor. If he didn't constantly demean himself and grovel, he wouldn't be constantly bullied." The masked man listened to Olivia Carter's complaints, saying nothing, only furrowing his brow slightly. "Marrying a man like that, having to protect him, it's laughable. Even more ludicrous is that he seems to relish the humiliation. He doesn't fight back, he just plays the fool." The masked man suddenly spoke. "See, you even say he plays the fool. Perhaps he's forced to act that way for some reason. Forced to accept humiliation." Olivia Carter, slightly agitated, lowered her propped-up hand and sat up straight, facing the masked man. What a flimsy excuse. He'd be more convincing if he just said he was playing it safe. Faced with Olivia Carter's questioning, the masked man remained silent. For a moment, the two sat in silence across the table from each other. Olivia Carter realized she had lost control of her emotions, overly angry and worried about Richard Lancaster. She also felt remorse for snapping at the masked man. He wasn't the source of her frustration, yet she'd vented her anger on him, darkening his mood. She wondered if his somberness stemmed from the third prince's situation or her outburst. "It's getting late. You should go home." The masked man paid the bill, stood, and extended a hand to help Olivia Carter up. Olivia Carter hesitated momentarily, looking at his outstretched hand. She then mocked herself internally, thinking that perhaps living in this era for so long had made her overly sensitive about propriety. Shaking her head and rubbing her temples, she took his hand and let him help her up, then headed towards the Carter estate with him. On the way, Olivia Carter's gaze repeatedly landed on his mask, curiosity piqued. Olivia Carter wasn't usually inquisitive, but she was genuinely curious about the face behind the mask of someone she'd spent a fair amount of time with. "Don't." The masked man's voice sounded beside her ear as he stopped her hand from reaching up towards his mask. Olivia Carter reluctantly replied, "My apologies, it was merely a momentary curiosity. She reminded herself again that everyone and everything here was only temporarily related to her, and she shouldn't get too involved. Otherwise, when the time came to leave, she wasn't sure if she could completely sever ties. The masked man looked down at Olivia Carter's slightly saddened face, thinking she was disappointed at not being able to see his face. He explained, "You said it yourself, a chance encounter necessitates no full disclosure." Having dug her own grave, Olivia Carter slightly regretted her momentary curiosity. Freeing herself from the masked man's grasp, Olivia Carter stepped forward on her own, but not without adding, "Rest assured, I won't pry. You've saved me twice, proving you pose no threat. That's enough for me." Chapter 15, Family Matters exposed. Upon returning to the Carter estate, as expected, no one dared to give Olivia Carter a hard time. Such a major incident had just occurred within the household that Chancellor Carter was still reeling, naturally having no time to pay attention to her. He was preoccupied with figuring out how to suppress the rumors and prevent this family matter from spreading. "I had a good night's sleep, though I didn't expect the wine from last night's tavern to have such a strong aftertaste. Waking up with a heavy head, I finally had to drink tea to lessen the dizziness. Breakfast this morning was unusually cold and tense. The usual bickering between Miranda Nightshade and Olivia Carter was absent, and Evelyn Carter, after yesterday's events, had withdrawn into herself. Chancellor Carter, with dark circles under his eyes, clearly hadn't slept well. Only Olivia Carter ate heartily, looking as if the sky could fall and it wouldn't concern her. Bang! Chancellor Carter slammed his chopsticks down, his face livid with rage, his eyes fixed on Olivia Carter with resentment. Everything stemmed from her, yet she now feigned indifference, carefree and unconcerned. Noticing Chancellor Carter's hateful gaze, Olivia Carter feigned innocence, continuing to eat as she pleased, almost defiantly chewing her food thoroughly, her face showing clear satisfaction after a hearty meal. "Olivia Carter, about what I said yesterday, have you thought it over?" Chancellor Carter still had the gall to bring up yesterday's conversation. Olivia Carter sneered inwardly. Never mind that Miranda Nightshade's actions were morally reprehensible and deserved the pigsty punishment. Even if Miranda were still present, facing 3 against 1, Olivia Carter would absolutely not yield. Olivia Carter gracefully wiped her mouth with a silk napkin, took a sip of tea to rinse her mouth, and then slowly raised her head, meeting Chancellor Carter's explosive gaze. Each word was clear and deliberate. "Father, there's no more need to think. I'll say it plainly today, you can forget about those 20 shops. I'm determined to have them." Having said that, she ignored Chancellor Carter's reddening face, his fury evident. Her eyes flicked towards Evelyn Carter, who, despite trying to restrain herself, still glared at Olivia with hatred. A sly smile played on Olivia's lips as a brilliant idea struck her. "If you want me to give up, fine. But I want to ask you, Father, is the scandal of the Carter family's mistress consorting with the butler, such a disgrace, worth 20 shops? If it is, then think no more about it." Chancellor Carter's expression immediately shifted. He gritted his teeth so hard they made a grinding sound, his eyes piercing Olivia Carter, yet he couldn't refute her words. Evelyn Carter stood beside her, indignant, and declared, "Olivia Carter, you've gone too far." Olivia Carter glanced at her, her voice as cold as ice. "Evelyn Carter, those words are more fitting coming from me. I merely exposed the truth and sought a fair exchange. If you hadn't pushed things too far, there would still be 4 people at this table." Enough. Chancellor Carter slammed his hand on the table in fury. The tableware rattled, tea splashing onto Olivia Carter's clothes. Chancellor Carter rose, pointing a finger at Olivia Carter's nose and bellowed, "Olivia Carter, haven't you caused enough trouble? How many more people must be buried with you?" "Buried with me?" Olivia Carter scoffed, a sneer twisting her lips. "Father, are you cursing your own daughter's death?" Without waiting for Chancellor Carter's reaction, Olivia Carter abruptly stood, glaring directly at him, and pointed at Evelyn Carter. "Father, one cannot be so heartless. I exposed the truth for you, yet you're still fixated on my 20 shops, all because this woman is about to become the prince's concubine." Chancellor Carter's face alternated between red and white. He hadn't expected Olivia Carter to confront him so directly. His eyebrows shot up, his breath heavy, his eyes blazing with fury, as if about to explode. Seeing Chancellor Carter's loss of composure, Olivia Carter felt a surge of amusement. She decided to add fuel to the fire, folding her arms and saying calmly, "I want to ask you, Father, do you see your 3 daughters as mere pawns to trade for your future peace? Don't you think you've gone too far?" Evelyn Carter stared at Olivia Carter in astonishment, her chopsticks clattering to the floor. It was unclear whether she was shocked by Chancellor Carter's sordid intentions or by Olivia Carter's audacity in voicing them. Olivia Carter lifted her chin, bravely meeting Chancellor Carter's murderous gaze. After all, she was about to marry into the royal family. Surely, Chancellor Carter wouldn't dare harm her, at least not before the wedding. Otherwise, if word reached the Emperor, even if the Empress tried to twist the truth, any harm to Olivia Carter would reflect poorly on him as her father. Chancellor Carter trembled with rage, pointing at Olivia Carter but unable to speak. He could only grit his teeth and spit out a few words filled with loathing, "You, ungrateful wretch." Olivia Carter snorted. After her outburst, a cold sweat broke out. Sitting down, she felt a chill on her scalp and a heaviness in her head. The lingering effects of last night's alcohol surged through her. Chancellor Carter started to say something, but Olivia Carter couldn't hear clearly. She only heard a servant announce, "Chancellor Carter, His Highness the Third Prince has arrived." Chancellor Carter composed himself, forcing calmness, and adjusted his robes before nodding to the servant. The servant left, and shortly after, Richard Lancaster entered, accompanied by Henry Cole. Chancellor Carter clasped his hands and stepped forward. "I was unaware of your Highness's arrival and apologize for not greeting you properly. May I ask the reason for your visit this early morning?" This was Chancellor Carter, the seasoned politician, playing his role of affable host to perfection, concealing any trace of the previous conflict. Richard Lancaster smiled faintly, waving a hand in acknowledgement of Chancellor Carter's greeting, then turned to Olivia Carter. "I've come to see Olivia Carter." Hearing this, Chancellor Carter's face shifted, yet he maintained his composure, gesturing an invitation while reproaching Olivia Carter, who remained seated, "My daughter lacks manners. Please forgive her, Your Highness." Richard Lancaster smiled at Olivia Carter, who still averted her gaze, and shook his head, "It's all right. I came to give you a gift." As soon as he finished speaking, Henry Cole stepped forward, holding an exquisite gam box. Olivia Carter glanced at it, and before she could speak, Henry Cole opened the box with a smile and placed it before her. Inside the gam box, nestled quietly, lay a pair of jade earrings, crafted from the broken dragon ring. Olivia Carter's eyes widened in surprise. She stared at the jade earrings for a long moment before finally turning her gaze to Richard Lancaster, asking in astonishment, "You carved the dragon ring into earrings? What about His Majesty's gift?" Richard Lancaster helplessly raised his hands. "The dragon ring was broken beyond repair. I could only carve it into earrings, specifically to apologize. As for the gift, I'll have to figure that out later." Olivia Carter took the earrings from Henry Cole, examining them closely. She noticed Evelyn Carter's gaze fixed on the earrings in her hand, filled with envy, malice, and clear resentment. Looking at Chancellor Carter, his entire face seemed immobile. He glanced at Olivia Carter and her jade earrings with a look of disdain. Understandably, a man of Chancellor Carter's wealth and standing wouldn't care about a small pair of jade earrings. What he disdained was likely Richard Lancaster's generosity. Olivia Carter cheerfully removed her old earrings and put on the jade ones, then tilted her head up to look at Richard Lancaster. "Pretty?" Richard Lancaster smiled gently, nodded, and gestured invitingly. "The dragon ring is gone, and I have no other leads. Why don't you come back to my residence with me and help me think a bit more? Hearing this, the image of the concubine Vanessa Young immediately appeared in Olivia Carter's mind, and she couldn't help but look troubled. But looking at Evelyn Carter's scowling face and Chancellor Carter's stone-like expression, she thought for a moment and agreed. She would rather face Vanessa Young's theatrics than endure the verbal attacks and emotional damage from these two. In the carriage on the way to the prince's residence, Richard Lancaster gazed intently at the jade earrings on Olivia Carter's ears, his expression unreadable. Olivia Carter glared at him, "Seen enough?" Richard Lancaster wasn't angry, his voice tinged with inquiry, "Fight with your family?" Olivia Carter scoffed, "If they can be called family, then aren't beggars and the Emperor brothers?" Richard Lancaster frowned, seemingly not understanding Olivia Carter's meaning, and asked curiously, "What do those two things have to do with each other?" Olivia Carter glanced at Richard Lancaster, thinking back to Vanessa Young's absurdity yesterday and his calm indifference. She showed no emotion, only shaking her head. "Talking to you is pointless. Clearly, you've become numb to things like this. Family and strangers are no different to you." Having said that, Olivia Carter realized she had spoken out of turn. Looking back at Richard Lancaster, she found his gaze directed elsewhere, perhaps not having fully heard her words. Despite a sliver of luck, Olivia Carter couldn't shake the bitter taste in her heart. Not for herself, but for the man before her. If family and strangers were indistinguishable, then he must be terribly lonely in this world. "I told you, don't look at me like that, as if I'm the beggar you speak of." Richard Lancaster abruptly turned, his stern gaze meeting Olivia Carter's lingering, pained expression. "I told you, don't look at me like that, as if I'm the beggar you speak of," he said seriously. Olivia Carter quickly looked away. She understood that feeling. Perhaps the masked man was right, Richard Lancaster had his own burdens. Otherwise, a man with such apparent pride, unable to bear even her slightly sympathetic gaze, why would he endure such humiliation from others, even from his own brother? Or perhaps, not even as good as a beggar. Olivia Carter had never seen Richard Lancaster so self-deprecating. She took all the blame upon herself, realizing her words and actions had truly hurt him. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to," Olivia Carter murmured, lowering her head. Richard Lancaster didn't respond to her apology. Instead, he looked up at her, his tone apologetic. "I'm sorry." Surprised, Olivia Carter raised her head, her gaze meeting Richard Lancaster's remorseful eyes. She frowned slightly, confused. "About yesterday, I apologize," Richard Lancaster added, his gaze drifting out the carriage window. The carriage passed through a bustling marketplace, the hawkers' cries incessant, yet the man before her seemed isolated from the crowd, quiet and composed. This reminded Olivia Carter of yesterday's events, dispelling any lingering anger or reproach. They rode in silence as the carriage entered the prince's estate. Chapter 16, Pity for His Highness. This time, Richard Lancaster didn't lead Olivia Carter to the study, but to the garden behind the prince's residence, a tranquil yet vibrant space. Lush grass, birdsong, fluttering butterflies, and the pervasive fragrance of flowers created a lively scene. Standing amidst this scenery, Olivia Carter took a deep breath, feeling refreshed and at ease. Unexpectedly, within this chaotic prince's estate lies such a rare patch of serenity. Truly a splendid place, Olivia Carter complimented, her sarcastic nature still slipping through. Richard Lancaster seemed unfazed. "As long as you like it. There's a pavilion by the lake where refreshments and tea are prepared. You can rest there." Olivia Carter sensed his dismissal and felt a flicker of annoyance. Her eyes scanned the area as she muttered, "You're leaving me alone again. What if your overbearing concubine appears? I wouldn't know what to do." Richard Lancaster, as if anticipating her words, smiled knowingly. "Don't worry, she won't be coming anymore." Reflexively, Olivia Carter blurted, "Why?" The words left her mouth before she realized her inquisitiveness. She didn't really expect a truthful answer. Seeing him only smile faintly without elaborating, she shrugged and turned towards the pavilion. By the time she sat down and looked back, Richard Lancaster was gone. A lame individual, yet surprisingly swift on their feet. Olivia Carter found herself amused, likening herself to Zhuge Liang of the Three Kingdoms era. But while he offered invaluable military strategies, she relied on fleeting intuitions to ponder strange matters, knowing those in power are drawn to novelty. This rare tranquil morning, free from the Carter estate's taunts and schemes, felt like a return to nature, a blossoming amidst the sea. Despite the different context, the sentiment resonated. Olivia Carter chuckled at her own fleeting artistic insight. "Miss Carter, if you require anything, please command me. I will remain close by to attend to your needs." Henry Cole's voice interrupted Olivia Carter's thoughts. Olivia Carter nodded awkwardly, replying, "Oh, all right." Before Henry Cole could leave, Olivia Carter, recalling something, called him back and inquired, "Why haven't I seen Vanessa Young around lately?" Olivia Carter had been at the pavilion for quite a while, and given Vanessa Young's gossipy nature, she should have appeared to provoke her by now, yet she was nowhere to be seen. Recalling Richard Lancaster's insinuations, Olivia Carter couldn't help but ask. Henry Cole's face tensed. He calmly replied in a low voice, "Madam passed away suddenly last night." He paused, keeping his head down, then added, "Miss Carter, do you have any other instructions?" Olivia Carter remained stunned, still reeling from the shock. Vanessa Young, dead unexpectedly. Due to her professional habits, Olivia Carter always felt that coincidences often concealed something more. Vanessa Young's death couldn't possibly be an accident. The phrase, "died unexpectedly," while perhaps fitting in ancient times, prompted Olivia Carter to shake her head in disagreement. "Miss Carter, do you have any further inquiries?" Henry Cole couldn't help but ask again. Olivia Carter, regaining her composure, looked at Henry Cole and unconsciously said, "You shouldn't have said anything. Now I feel a chill down my spine. I'm alone in this vast garden, it's frightening. Come, stay with me." Personally invited by Miss Carter, Henry Cole had no reason to refuse, so he returned to the pavilion and stood beside her. Olivia Carter, feeling uncomfortable, gestured to the opposite stone bench. "Henry Cole, you should sit across from me. I'm not used to being served, it's unsettling having you stand there." Hearing this, Henry Cole felt a greater kinship with Olivia Carter. Her circumstances mirrored those of the third prince, perhaps even more tragic. At least the third prince had servants from a young age. Despite his disability in the mockery from his siblings, he was still 100 times more fortunate than Miss Carter, who had been foolish since childhood, bullied and neglected. "What are you thinking about? You seem lost in thought." Olivia Carter poured a full cup of tea, placed it before Henry Cole, and asked gently, devoid of any arrogance. "Aside from His Highness the Third Prince, only Miss Carter treats the servants this way." Looking at Miss Carter before him, beautiful as a fairy yet as friendly as family, Henry Cole suddenly felt a fondness for her. Moreover, because His Highness the Third Prince enjoyed her company so much, and love my dog, the person his master wanted to marry was not only gentle but also humble, it was hard not to like her. Henry Cole gave a naive smile and shook his head, "It's nothing, I just feel happy for my master's good fortune." Olivia Carter, amused, took a sip of tea, wetting her lips. "What fortune? Tell me." Henry Cole chuckled, shyly looking at Olivia Carter, rubbing his knee with his hand, "Although I don't know much, I've met quite a few people, and I'm sure I'm not wrong about people. Miss Carter is a good person, and it's His Highness the Third Prince's fortune to marry you, so I'm happy for him." Olivia Carter choked on her tea, coughing loudly, and hurriedly covered her mouth with a silk handkerchief. Henry Cole, thinking he had said something wrong, immediately stood up. Seeing Olivia Carter's face flushed from choking, he awkwardly poured another cup of tea and offered it to her. After a moment, Olivia Carter caught her breath, took the teacup from Henry Cole, waved her hand at him, and said hoarsely, sit down, I'm fine. Henry Cole sat down awkwardly, watching Olivia Carter take a sip of tea to soothe her throat and wipe the corner of her mouth. When she looked at him, he quickly lowered his head. I'm sorry, did I say something wrong? Olivia Carter shook her head. It's rare for someone to praise me like that, it makes me feel both flattered and apprehensive. Having said that, Olivia Carter laughed, but in Henry Cole's eyes, the laughter held a hint of bitterness. As the third daughter of Chancellor Carter, with a beauty that could topple cities, she had never received such praise. The thought was poignant. Olivia Carter finally understood the essence of Richard Lancaster's words, "Don't look at me like that." Now, Henry Cole's gaze held a touch of sympathy, making Olivia Carter feel like a pitiable figure. However, what she didn't want for herself, she wouldn't force on others. Richard Lancaster's response and the cold, dissatisfied look on his face, Olivia Carter couldn't imitate, nor did she want to make things difficult for Henry Cole, so she simply changed the subject. You overestimate me. It's my good fortune to be married to His Highness the Third Prince. Pleasantries anyone could offer, but the difference lay in whether the speaker felt comfortable or the listener felt at ease. Henry Cole's eyes lit up. I don't know if Miss Carter has noticed, but every time you come, the most common expression on His Highness the Third Prince's face is a smile. But when you leave, even if he smiles, it's bitter or forced, not from the heart. Only Miss Carter can bring true joy to His Highness the Third Prince. Henry Cole was, perhaps intentionally or unintentionally, revealing a piece of information. His Highness the Third Prince was fond of Miss Carter. But Olivia Carter gleaned a different meaning from his words. The masked man's words echoed in her ears. He has his reasons, so he's forced to do this. No one wanted to be compelled to do things they disliked. Richard Lancaster, a prince with a physical disability, constantly endured such helplessness. He must be suffering deeply, Olivia Carter thought. Henry Cole, seeing Olivia Carter's silence and slightly furrowed brows, couldn't discern anything from her expression. Puzzled, he suddenly heard her ask, "Where is His Highness the Third Prince now?" Henry Cole froze, then reacted after a moment, rising with a smile. "Miss Carter, come, I'll take you there." Henry Cole was evidently more excited than Olivia Carter. He believed his words had made her realize something, prompting her eagerness to see the third prince. Olivia Carter wasn't overthinking it. Her only thought was Richard Lancaster's genuine happiness, sparing him any unwanted distress. Entering the study once more, Olivia Carter's eyes lit up. The previous night's dust was gone, the bookshelves rearranged, a Calligraph Young painting hung on the wall, and the four treasures of the study neatly arranged, giving the room an elegant air. After the person was brought in, Henry Cole sought instructions from Richard Lancaster and left. Olivia Carter strolled around the study, her smile widening. Richard Lancaster, as if seeking praise, asked, "Well, not bad, eh?" Olivia Carter's eyes sparkled with approval, but she nodded seriously. Passable. Don't tell me you arranged this yourself, or that the housekeeper suddenly became kind. I doubt both of you." Richard Lancaster was inwardly delighted. Her suspicion stemmed from the impeccable arrangement. "I won't hide it from you, I did ask a few skilled maids in the residence to help," Richard Lancaster admitted honestly. Olivia Carter feigned surprise. "I can't believe someone actually listened to you." It was meant as a jest, and Richard Lancaster chuckled, unbothered. But Olivia Carter fell silent, realizing her thoughtlessness and bluntness. Facing Richard Lancaster, Olivia Carter was always unrestrained, her words often impulsive. Richard Lancaster, either deaf to them or overly tolerant, always endured them without retort. Feeling guilty, Olivia Carter forced a gentle smile, pointing to the chair before Richard Lancaster. "Sit down. Consider this a surprise for arranging the study." Richard Lancaster obediently sat, watching as Olivia Carter pulled a blue silk cloth from her sleeve. "Watch closely, only one performance. Missing it means paying to see it again," Olivia Carter winked playfully, raising the silk and tossing it beside her in the air. Richard Lancaster's gaze was fixed on the blue silk, unblinking. Chapter 17, Be Mine. Richard Lancaster rarely displayed such intense focus. Whether gambling with Theodore Lancaster, being bullied, or helping Olivia Carter, he always seemed detached. To others, it appeared as a flaw, naivete coupled with his low rank among the princes, leading to reticence or insecurity. But after hearing Henry Cole's words, Olivia Carter suddenly realized that perhaps Richard Lancaster was using this demeanor to isolate himself from the outside world, minimizing the hurt others could inflict upon him. Thinking of this, Olivia Carter became even more exhilarated. She knew the purpose of her current actions was to make Richard Lancaster truly happy from the bottom of his heart. The blue silk in her hands trembled slightly, her hands slowly withdrawing, leaving the silk suspended in mid-air. Richard Lancaster's eyes narrowed slightly, the corners of his mouth lifting in a small smile, his gaze fixed on the silk, not moving an inch. Clearly, this performance captivated him, Olivia Carter could see it. With a flick of her right index finger, she controlled the silk from afar, making it spin faster and faster. The blue silk seemed to grow larger, separating Olivia Carter and Richard Lancaster, completely obscuring their view of each other. Suddenly, the silk fell to the ground, and for a moment, Richard Lancaster didn't react. When he recovered from his surprise, Olivia Carter was nowhere to be seen. Olivia Carter, Olivia Carter. Richard Lancaster searched everywhere in the room, but found no trace of her. Your Highness, look up. Olivia Carter's voice came from above. Richard Lancaster looked up and saw her sitting on a rafter, legs crossed, swinging comfortably, her eyes looking down at him with amusement. Richard Lancaster's face showed confusion. How did you get up there so fast? Olivia Carter waved, signaling Richard Lancaster to step back a bit, then jumped down, picked up the silk from the ground, and held it up in front of him. It's magic, but it's all trickery. Those in the know will see the gimmick, while outsiders only see the wonder. I have even more delightful tricks. Please sit down, and I'll perform them for you. Without pausing for explanation, she took 2 steps back, revealing the silk from inside and out, demonstrating it was empty. Her hands moved within the folds of the silk, fumbling for a moment, then suddenly produced several roses, each bunch more breathtaking than the last. Just as Richard Lancaster clapped in appreciation, a mischievous glint crossed Olivia Carter's face. With a snap of her fingers, the roses disintegrated, petals fluttering down, landing softly. Richard Lancaster's hands froze mid-air as he stared, mesmerized, at Olivia Carter standing amidst the falling petals, a radiant smile on her face as she looked at him. A sweet feeling spread through him, instantly enveloping his entire being, as if joy itself was singing from every corner. Besides his mother, she was the second person who could make him feel this happy. Richard Lancaster applauded, his laughter hearty and genuine, his eyes and smile filled with sincerity. Seeing Richard Lancaster's happiness, Olivia Carter's mood also lightened. The silk, which had been as large as her body, instantly shrunk and disappeared into her sleeve, leaving nothing in her hand. Richard Lancaster asked curiously, such a large piece of silk, how could you shrink it and hide it in your sleeve? Before Olivia Carter could answer, he pointed to the rose petals scattered on the ground and asked excitedly, and these petals, I know magicians usually hide them on their person, but, Richard Lancaster's eyes swept over Olivia Carter's petite frame, wondering how such a small girl could hide so many roses. Where did you hide them? Hearing Richard Lancaster's incessant chatter, Olivia Carter lifted her chin haughtily, a smug look plastered across her face, hands clasped behind her back as she sauntered over to his side. Does His Highness the Third Prince enjoy this magic trick? Olivia Carter asked, raising an eyebrow at him. Richard Lancaster nodded, the excitement and grin still plastered on his face, looking like a child craving sweets. Olivia Carter's heart softened. Then call me master, take me as your teacher, and I will teach you. Richard Lancaster was immediately taken aback, and after a long pause, he uttered a sentence that made Olivia Carter roll her eyes. you will be mine sooner or later, so taking you as my master is too formal. A wife is much closer than a master. Besides, a wife teaching her husband is perfectly acceptable. Olivia Carter pouted, unsure if Richard Lancaster was genuinely sincere or feigning ignorance. Every word he spoke seemed designed to counter her arguments, leaving her no room for rebuttal. It seemed his logical thinking was quite strong, albeit somewhat twisted. Those are the rules of the game. It's clear you're not sincere. You only had one chance, and now even if you beg, it's too late. Olivia Carter glared at Richard Lancaster, plopping down heavily across from him. Faced with Olivia Carter's annoyance, Richard Lancaster simply smiled, as if coaxing a child, all right, if you don't want me to beg, I won't. As long as you know. His words made Olivia Carter glare at him again, a strange feeling unexpectedly bubbling up within her. In front of others, even in front of Chancellor Carter, she always projected the image of a wolf, allowing no one to approach or belittle her, even remembering every slight to repay at the appropriate time. Yet, in front of Richard Lancaster, Olivia Carter found herself acting carelessly and willfully, a realization that made her hesitant to delve deeper. Determined to leave the intrigues of this place behind, Olivia Carter absolutely did not want any mishaps along the way. Even though this man was about to become her husband, in her mind, he was merely a passerby. Her previous actions, meant to amuse him, were merely out of empathy. Hearing Richard Lancaster's placating words, Olivia Carter felt an urgent need to correct the gradually diverging trajectory of their relationship. Dismissing the previous incident, she said, I've thought and thought, but I still can't come up with a novel gift for His Majesty. I'm afraid you'll have to think of something yourself. Richard Lancaster's eyes lit up as he looked at Olivia Carter, a hint of surprise in his voice. Not at all, I think this gift is very special, very good. In the Eastern Tang Kingdom, I'm probably the only one who would do this. I'm sure Father will love it. Olivia Carter blinked, tilting her head as she asked, what gift? I don't see anything. Richard Lancaster pointed to the blue silk sleeve Olivia Carter was concealing, the magic trick. On Father's birthday, you can perform the magic trick for him. He'll definitely be delighted. Olivia Carter snorted, pouting as she indicated her unwillingness to continue the discussion. Your Highness the Third Prince, you should still consider other ideas. This trick is too common. While novel, in the royal court, such a lowbrow performance will only bring laughter and criticism that you're not sincere. Richard Lancaster's face fell, a flicker of disappointment crossing his features, but he nodded nonetheless. Are you afraid I'll be bullied by the other princes? You care about me, don't you? Richard Lancaster pressed, his gaze fixed intently on Olivia Carter's face. Olivia Carter glanced at him, then looked away. Nonsense. I'm only worried your childish notions will further diminish your standing within the royal family. That's all. Richard Lancaster stepped closer, his voice low. If it's not concern, then what is it? Richard Lancaster frowned, impatience flickering across his face, and steered the conversation towards their betrothal. You've said it yourself, I'm your future imperial consort. If you allow others to constantly suppress you, won't I be at a disadvantage after I marry you? But you said you wouldn't regret it. Richard Lancaster clung to her words, refusing to let go. Olivia Carter wasn't sure whether to commend his excellent memory or regret digging her own grave. Olivia Carter furrowed her brow, her tone exasperated. Your Highness, the most important thing right now is to devise a birthday gift for His Majesty, not to argue about our marriage. His Majesty has already decreed our union, do you really fear I'll run away? Looking into Richard Lancaster's eyes, Olivia Carter couldn't decipher the emotions swirling within them, nor how much of it was directed at her. Faced with the gentle, profound smile on his face, she felt her ears flush with warmth and quickly turned away. Richard Lancaster's voice was slow, soft, and warm. Don't worry. With me here, no one will harm you. This indirect confession, compared to blatant words that caused Blushing was even more disarming. Sometimes Olivia Carter even wondered if Richard Lancaster's outward innocence and humble forbearance were merely an act. Was this present demeanor, both knowing how to capture and soothe a woman's heart, and appearing responsible, his true self? Olivia Carter could confront Chancellor Carter's reprimands, Miranda Nightshade's false accusations, Evelyn Carter's overbearing behavior, and even Theodore Lancaster's provocations to protect Richard Lancaster. This was because she was confident in her ability to retaliate forcefully, to be the last one holding the rubber band, both calmly and causing the opponent to suffer a miserable counterattack. But facing Richard Lancaster, she could only be passive, invisibly manipulated by him emotionally, and unconsciously falling into the traps he skillfully set. Olivia Carter looked at Richard Lancaster. His smile remained as sincere as ever, so sincere that it was hard to doubt. Finally, she shook her head and changed the subject. "I heard from your servants that concubine Vanessa Young suddenly passed away." Olivia Carter carefully observed Richard Lancaster, searching for even the slightest unusual expression on his face. But Richard Lancaster only hummed in acknowledgement. Aside from retracting his smile, he returned to his indifferent demeanor, as if it had nothing to do with him. Seeing him like this, Olivia Carter couldn't help but speak up. "Concubine Vanessa Young was a concubine bestowed upon you by the Empress. She died in your residence. Aren't you worried the Empress will investigate and hold you responsible? Shouldn't you investigate concubine Vanessa Young's death?" Richard Lancaster looked deeply at Olivia Carter. "It's been determined to be a sudden death. What else is there to investigate? Even if the Empress asks, it was a sudden death. There's nothing to investigate." Olivia Carter sensed Richard Lancaster's displeasure, realizing she'd overstepped, and fell silent. Silence descended upon the study, broken only by birdsong from a plane tree near the window, easing the awkward stillness between them. Henry Cole entered, his step steady. Seeing the two seated opposite each other in silence, a flicker of surprise crossed his face before he composed himself and addressed Richard Lancaster respectfully, "Your Highness, the Crown Prince and the Sixth Prince have arrived." Olivia Carter started at the news, only to hear Richard Lancaster calmly inquire, "Where are they?" Henry Cole, his expression calm, looked towards Richard Lancaster and replied, "In the front hall. The head housekeeper is attending to them." Richard Lancaster nodded, turning to Olivia Carter. "Since elder brother and sixth brother are here, let's join them in the front hall." Olivia maintained her composure, determined to see what tricks the Crown Prince and Sixth Prince had up their sleeves. Chapter 18, The Crown Prince stirs up trouble. The Crown Prince, Frederick Lancaster, had always considered Richard Lancaster a useless, easily bullied individual. He and Theodore Lancaster often found amusement in tormenting Richard Lancaster as a pastime. Olivia Carter followed Richard Lancaster to the front hall. Before entering, she saw the head housekeeper bowing and scraping, serving tea and refreshments to the Crown Prince and Sixth Prince with utmost deference. Her words dripped with flattery and subservience, a stark contrast to the rigid and overbearing demeanor Olivia had initially encountered. Olivia Carter scoffed. Richard Lancaster, hearing this, turned to her. Seeing the disdain and indignation on her face, he murmured, "Care for a bit of amusement?" Olivia Carter, caught off guard by Richard Lancaster's sudden turn, hadn't time to mask her expression. His tall frame leaned down, his warm breath tickling her ear as he spoke, sending shivers down her spine. As if jolted by electricity, Olivia Carter stepped back slightly, but not before retorting, "What amusement? Watching them humiliate you?" Richard Lancaster shook his head slightly, pausing before continuing, "I enjoyed the magic trick you performed in the study. Now, I'll show you a good play, one that's not only entertaining but will also help you vent your anger." Olivia Carter, still surprised by his words, watched as a cryptic smile spread across his face before he turned and limped into the front hall. Curiosity piqued, Olivia followed closely behind. "My apologies for not greeting elder brother and sixth brother upon your arrival. My deepest regrets." Richard Lancaster dutifully performed the customary courtesies. A bright, sunny smile graced Richard Lancaster's face. Despite the imperfections of his ear and leg, he remained a handsome figure among the princes. Olivia Carter, pushing aside a pang of bitterness, stood beside Richard Lancaster. The sight of Frederick Lancaster and Theodore Lancaster's loathsome expressions ignited a protective instinct within her. Like a fierce hen guarding her chick, she felt compelled to defend Richard Lancaster's remaining dignity. Frederick Lancaster, seated in the position of honor, wore a mocking smile, his head held high, arrogance and disdain evident in his gaze. After all, freedom is still the best, even more comfortable than being the emperor. The more Olivia Carter witnessed the helplessness and power struggles within the royal family, the scheming against one another, the firmer her resolve to leave became. "Oh, the Carter family's third miss is here too." Frederick Lancaster looked Olivia Carter up and down with a suggestive gaze, a mixture of surprise and admiration, tinged with faint mockery, his tone laced with a hint of jealousy. The incident at the Peony Flower Festival, where Olivia Carter was wrongly accused by the Crown Prince, and everything that followed stemmed from the gifts the Crown Prince and Evelyn Carter gave that day. This grudge, she would certainly avenge for the original owner of this body. Recalling the events at the Peony Flower Festival, Olivia Carter furrowed her brows, straightened her back, neither arrogant nor humble, and looked directly into the other party's eyes, her gaze hardening. Olivia Carter greets His Highness the Crown Prince, and His Highness the Third Prince. After the greeting, she sat down beside Richard Lancaster, continuing to stare directly at Frederick Lancaster until he awkwardly averted his gaze, glared angrily at Richard Lancaster, and turned away. Richard Lancaster observed the silent struggle between the two, the corners of his lips curling slightly, his eyes looking at Olivia Carter with a doting expression. This made Frederick Lancaster and Theodore Lancaster beside him grind their teeth, believing that Richard Lancaster was indulging Olivia Carter in confronting them, and also realizing that Richard Lancaster couldn't control her. Theodore Lancaster had previously been humiliated by Olivia Carter, losing face in front of everyone. This time, he brought the Crown Prince here to humiliate Richard Lancaster, and since Olivia Carter was also present, he intended to settle both old and new scores. Theodore Lancaster laughed loudly, his voice piercing, echoing Frederick Lancaster's words. "Indeed, the Carter family's third miss is indifferent to everyone, only showing special concern for third brother. The marriage bestowed by Her Majesty the Empress is truly a match made in heaven." Theodore Lancaster's gaze shifted between Olivia Carter and Richard Lancaster, his tone changing. "However, third Miss Carter, even before officially marrying, has frequently visited third brother's residence. Aren't you afraid of outsiders thinking you're lacking in virtue, eager to climb the social ladder? If this gets out, won't people laugh and Chancellor Carter lose face?" As soon as Theodore Lancaster finished speaking, Frederick Lancaster's unrestrained laughter echoed throughout the hall. Olivia Carter clenched her fists, looking at their expressions, wanting nothing more than to throw the tea on the table in their faces, ruining their appearances so they would no longer have the opportunity to hurt a young woman's heart. Although Frederick Lancaster was the noble crown prince of a nation, his outward behavior and words were somewhat restrained, yet despite this, romantic scandals constantly arose. Girls, fearing the crown prince's noble status, even if wronged, dared not seek justice. With his handsome face and noble status, who knew how many girls willingly succumbed, disregarding their reputation and future? Olivia Carter always despised Vanessa Younglander and young masters, and coupled with her professional habits, she would teach a lesson to anyone who deserved it. But the people before her were the Crown Prince and the Sixth Prince, so she still had to consider her actions. Olivia Carter didn't care how Theodore Lancaster mocked her, but Richard Lancaster, standing beside her, spoke up. "Sixth brother, a few days ago, I was passing by the drunken spring house when a girl rushed out, crying and tugging at my clothes, calling your name, saying you promised to take her back to your residence, and even claiming she was carrying your child." Richard Lancaster said nothing more, only his clear eyes gazed at Theodore Lancaster, his expression so serious that even Olivia Carter beside him couldn't help but believe his words were true. Theodore Lancaster's expression tensed, he gave a forced laugh to cover it up, waving his hand dismissively. How could that be? Third brother's hearing isn't good, you must have misheard. Despite saying this, Theodore Lancaster didn't forget to mock Richard Lancaster. Before Olivia could retort, Richard Lancaster smiled slowly and said, perhaps so, but she took out a handkerchief, embroidered with a pattern I've actually seen on sixth brother's handkerchief. Theodore Lancaster lost his composure, not waiting for Richard Lancaster to finish, he hastily denied, any woman could embroider that pattern. Many have seen my handkerchief, just like third brother said, you've also seen this handkerchief. It's not impossible for someone to forge it and then frame me. Olivia Carter's palms were sweating, her eyes sharp as swords, fixed on Theodore Lancaster. He truly didn't miss any opportunity to humiliate Richard Lancaster. He brought Frederick Lancaster here today, clearly intending to embarrass Richard Lancaster. Richard Lancaster frowned slightly, as if trying to recall something, his expression somewhat dazed and dreamy, murmuring, sixth brother has a point, the fabric of that handkerchief is indeed only found in the palace, but there's one thing third brother doesn't understand, there's the character, so, in the bottom right corner. Olivia Carter noticed that, upon hearing this, Theodore Lancaster's eyes filled with anxiety as he looked towards Frederick Lancaster, seemingly seeking help. Richard Lancaster continued slowly, I remember only you can write that style of calligraphy, and I also remember sixth brother once saying that, besides the embroiderer a tie in your residence, no one else can embroider that style. Sixth brother. Before Richard Lancaster could finish, Frederick Lancaster interrupted, pointing at Theodore Lancaster and sighing, sixth brother has been mischievous since childhood, have you forgotten? Sixth brother must have accidentally dropped it, and some ill-mannered person picked it up, then shamelessly tried to use it for blackmail. It's best for third brother to ignore this sort of opportunistic person. Richard Lancaster appeared puzzled, his brow furrowed with worry, looking towards Frederick Lancaster, Your Highness, if this matter becomes public, people will surely say sixth brother's behavior is improper, disgracing the royal family. If this spreads within the court, it will not only be a laughingstock, but also more than just a loss of face. Theodore Lancaster and Frederick Lancaster's faces changed instantly, both looking at Richard Lancaster, unable to hide the shock and hatred on their faces. They never expected that Richard Lancaster, who was usually simple and uncalculating, could so subtly retaliate against them, leaving them utterly astonished. However, before they could react, Richard Lancaster's next words immediately dispelled their suspicions. So, I gave that woman some money, so she could live well, give birth, and raise the child. She took the money and happily returned. So, handling it this way, aren't both sides satisfied? Richard Lancaster looked at Theodore Lancaster and Frederick Lancaster with an ingratiating gaze, like a small dog waiting for a treat. This was precisely what Olivia Carter was thinking. Richard Lancaster's demeanor made Olivia Carter's heart ache. He had clearly stood up for her, but she would rather risk offending Theodore Lancaster to refute him than have Richard Lancaster's naivete continue to be mocked by the two princes. Ha ha. Ha ha. Theodore Lancaster and Frederick Lancaster exchanged glances, both recognizing the disdain in the other's eyes, then threw back their heads and laughed heartily. Third brother, you've been duped. The women at the drunken spring house aren't the type to settle down and bear children. They only care for money, and they'll never have enough. Frederick Lancaster mocked Richard Lancaster's naivete and kindness. Having just been countered, Theodore Lancaster was naturally unwilling to concede, so he sought to regain face. Second brother, you really frightened me just now. I thought, here I am, the dignified sixth prince, how could I possibly be involved with a courtesan? I never imagined that besides your poor hearing, your eyesight isn't much better either. Olivia Carter gritted her teeth in anger. Theodore Lancaster was clearly being deliberately provocative. She was about to stand up and speak when Richard Lancaster gently held her hand. Looking at him in surprise, she saw he still maintained his youthful, almost childlike demeanor. That's possible, but to avoid trouble for sixth brother, I retrieved the handkerchief from her. It's currently with Steward Zhang Mama. Whether it's real or fake, bringing it out for examination will make it clear. Having said that, Richard Lancaster was about to summon Zhang Mama to fetch the handkerchief. Chapter 19, Birthday Gift. At this moment, Theodore Lancaster's face was completely pale, as if he had swallowed a bitter pill, unable to voice his distress. He had brought this upon himself. If he spoke up to stop it, it would be tantamount to admitting the truth. But if he didn't, once Zhang Mama presented the handkerchief, if it truly was his, the accusation would be confirmed. Theodore Lancaster was anxious and restless, his only recourse being to appeal to Frederick Lancaster once more. Seeing Theodore Lancaster's state, Frederick Lancaster understood in his heart that things were indeed as Richard Lancaster had said. He first glanced at Theodore Lancaster with exasperation, silently berating his incompetence and carelessness. Theodore Lancaster, noticing Frederick Lancaster's reproachful gaze, trembled inwardly, fearing his elder brother wouldn't help him. He was just about to speak when Zhang Mama, the steward who always stood by their side, said, "Third Prince, the handkerchief you gave me, when I went to inspect the kitchen, a careless maid accidentally threw it into the fire. It's been burned." A single sentence brought relief to both Theodore Lancaster and Frederick Lancaster. Frederick Lancaster glanced impassively at Zhang Mama. Theodore Lancaster's gaze towards her held a flicker of gratitude, but when he turned back to Richard Lancaster, a smug look appeared. Zhang Mama's face remained calm, but a knowing smile flickered in her deep-set eyes. If Olivia Carter wasn't mistaken, it was the smug look of a villain who had achieved their goal. Olivia Carter, standing beside them, clearly observed the interaction between the three, her hands clenched into fists beneath the table. This Zhang Mama, why would she help the Crown Prince and the Sixth Prince? Could it be? An unpleasant thought flashed through Olivia Carter's mind, startling her. She turned to look at Richard Lancaster. Richard Lancaster remained calm. Hearing these words, he didn't show anger, but a look of understanding appeared on his face. "So that's how it is. What a pity. Initially, I wanted Sixth Brother to verify it, to avoid outsiders forging his handkerchief and committing wrongdoing. If it were reported to the Department of Internal Affairs, even if Second Brother wanted to help, he wouldn't be able to." A look of regret filled Richard Lancaster's face. As he met Theodore Lancaster's relieved and smug gaze, a hint of remorse appeared in his eyes. "Sixth Brother, I'm truly sorry. The servants in my residence are so inconsiderate. If a similar situation arises in the future, Second Brother will personally bring people to your residence for a direct confrontation, lest outsiders tarnish your reputation. It wouldn't be good if this matter reached the court." Richard Lancaster's sincere words caused Theodore Lancaster's face to instantly freeze, leaving him speechless. Beside them, Olivia Carter observed Theodore Lancaster's face darken after hearing these words, while Frederick Lancaster only moved his lips, unable to find a suitable retort. Olivia Carter pursed her lips, suppressing a smile. Richard Lancaster's words were truly cutting. Theodore and Frederick Lancaster's romantic escapades would undoubtedly be thoroughly investigated upon their return. Richard's childish sincerity made them even more apprehensive, because he wasn't just talking. Most court officials had multiple wives and concubines, and many frequented taverns and brothels. By Olivia Carter's black and white standards, few could be considered truly virtuous. Olivia Carter understood this well. Therefore, many in the court adhered to a principle of mutual destruction, refraining from exposing or reporting on each other, creating a tacit agreement hidden behind the law. Compared to other court officials, Frederick and Theodore Lancaster had the advantage of their status. Without a deep-seated grudge, who would dare accuse the Crown Prince and the Sixth Prince, knowing the truth? It would be suicide. Most people in court understood the art of diplomacy. Turning a blind eye was commonplace to keep their official hats on their heads. But Richard Lancaster's well-known stubbornness was Frederick and Theodore Lancaster's Achilles' heel. They weren't afraid of being investigated by other officials, they could at least find each other's weaknesses to exploit. But with Richard, besides his stubbornness ruining things, even if they found his weakness, they couldn't make him understand the unspoken rules of the court. Whether intentionally mocking Frederick and Theodore Lancaster, or genuinely amused, Olivia Carter's shaking chest finally erupted in laughter. She covered her mouth with a silk handkerchief, giggling, further infuriating the two men whose faces were already grim. "Miss Carter, I wonder what amusing thought could cause such unladylike laughter," Theodore Lancaster said, practically gritting his teeth, attempting to use his princely status to subdue her. Olivia Carter was unafraid of his intimidation. Under Theodore Lancaster's murderous gaze, she finally regained control of her laughter. Straightening her back, she met his eyes, her slightly flushed face still carrying a hint of amusement. Clearing her throat, she said, "Your Highness, after hearing the third prince's words, I simply thought that girl was foolish, handing over the handkerchief just for some money. It seems the person who gave her the handkerchief wasn't even worth as much as the third prince's payment." As soon as she finished speaking, Theodore Lancaster's lips twitched, his eyes blazing with fury, as if he wanted to incinerate Olivia Carter on the spot. Frederick Lancaster didn't let it go, coldly asking, "Then how should she have acted, Miss Carter, to not be foolish?" Olivia Carter smiled gently. Frederick Lancaster wasn't truly curious, he wanted to see how ruthless she could be. Inwardly, Olivia Carter scoffed, but her outward smile was so sweet it could melt the hostility in Frederick Lancaster's eyes. She knew the power of this facade. It might not work on Richard Lancaster, but for someone who appreciated beauty like Frederick, it was a fatal blow. Indeed, facing Olivia Carter's gentle, water-like smile, Frederick Lancaster momentarily became dazed. Meanwhile, Theodore Lancaster, fuming from the embarrassment Olivia Carter had caused him, noticed Frederick Lancaster's distraction at this crucial moment and cleared his throat twice. Only then did Frederick Lancaster snap out of it, immediately regaining his usual air of arrogant indifference. Richard Lancaster's hand, initially holding Olivia Carter's, now gently caressed it, as if conveying strength to her. Olivia Carter, sensing this, tilted her head to look at him, and he responded with a warm smile. This simple gesture, in the eyes of Frederick Lancaster and Theodore Lancaster, was interpreted as a public display of affection, even a tacit declaration of ownership over Olivia Carter. This felt like a sharp slap in the face to Frederick Lancaster, who had just moments ago been captivated by Olivia Carter, crossing the boundaries of propriety. Olivia Carter smiled, saying, "There's a saying, the deeper the love, the deeper the hate. If a woman truly loves someone, yet is abandoned by that person, she will find that man's fatal weakness to retaliate, leaving him no chance to resist." Without waiting for Frederick Lancaster and Theodore Lancaster to retort, Olivia Carter added, "Your Highness, the Crown Prince and Sixth Prince, never underestimate a woman's ruthlessness. Once they are determined to seek revenge, they will employ methods you can't even imagine. As long as they achieve their goal, they won't hesitate, even if it means self-sacrifice." From beginning to end, Olivia Carter maintained a gentle smile on her face, as if those venomous words hadn't come from her lips. Theodore Lancaster, unwilling to appear weak, narrowed his eyes and asked Olivia Carter, "I wonder if Miss Carter is among such women?" Olivia Carter, anticipating his question, replied softly, "That depends on the third prince's sincerity." Then, she turned her gaze towards Richard Lancaster. Playing along, Richard Lancaster took Olivia Carter's hand, his eyes full of tenderness, his voice firm, "Don't worry, I will definitely treat you well." Inwardly, Olivia Carter cursed Richard Lancaster for taking advantage of the situation, but a faint blush crept onto her cheeks, feigning shyness. Theodore Lancaster, repeatedly provoked by Richard Lancaster and Olivia Carter throughout the day, seethed with resentment. He had come intending to settle the score with them, but unexpectedly, they had turned the tables on him. Suddenly remembering something, Theodore Lancaster interrupted the sweet moment between Olivia Carter and Richard Lancaster. "Third brother, father's grand birthday celebration is in a few days. The Crown Prince and I came here precisely for this matter. After speaking, Theodore Lancaster and Frederick Lancaster exchanged glances, the corners of their mouths curling upwards. Knowing that third brother usually dislikes exchanging gifts, the Crown Prince and I thought long and hard and finally prepared a gift for you. Having said that, he ordered someone to bring in a piece of wood. Olivia Carter had seen this type of object in antique markets. Unlike stones, which are graded and valued for their rarity, this piece of wood was peculiar because of its natural shape. Intricate roots and branches climbed around the main trunk, some reaching outwards, others curving gracefully. But even after observing it for a long time, Olivia Carter couldn't discern what the wood resembled. Such a chaotic piece of wood, devoid of artistic value, presented as a gift, wouldn't it embarrass Richard Lancaster before the Emperor? Olivia Carter withdrew her appraising gaze and turned to look at Richard Lancaster. She saw a strange emotion flicker in his eyes, but in a blink, he returned to his usual composure. Frederick Lancaster and Theodore Lancaster smiled faintly, looking towards Richard Lancaster, seemingly awaiting his reaction. However, to their disappointment, Richard Lancaster merely glanced at them indifferently. It was unclear whether he genuinely didn't recognize anything or had completely forgotten about the past incident. In short, apart from a calm, unruffled expression, he displayed no other emotion. Theodore Lancaster couldn't help but point at the wooden stake and ask Richard Lancaster, "Third brother, do you know what this is?" Richard Lancaster stood up, walked around the wooden stake once, vaguely shook his head, and said two words, "Wooden stake." Theodore Lancaster's expression faltered, and he unwillingly continued to ask, "Third brother, look closely. Don't you think this wooden stake resembles something?" Richard Lancaster obediently bent down and looked closely for a long while, then shook his head in denial. "It's just a wooden stake. There's nothing special about it." Theodore Lancaster looked towards Frederick Lancaster. Frederick Lancaster chuckled, took 2 steps forward, put his arm around Richard Lancaster's shoulder, pointed at the twisted branches clinging to the wooden stake, and guided him step by step. "Third brother, look, doesn't this closely resemble the figure of the person father pushed off the cliff 10 years ago? 10 years ago, the figure of the person the Emperor pushed off the cliff?" Upon hearing this, Olivia became curious and tried to search her memories, but she couldn't find any clues. Could this matter have become an internal secret of the royal family, never revealed to the outside world? If so, this was indeed not a glorious matter. Otherwise, with the Emperor's desire to leave a lasting legacy, he would have undoubtedly made it public. If Frederick Lancaster and Theodore Lancaster wanted Richard Lancaster to present this object to the Emperor, they clearly intended to make Richard Lancaster touch upon the pain the Emperor deliberately avoided, thereby leading to disaster. ### Chapter 20 Jade Dragon ascends to heaven. Olivia Carter bit her lip, unsure if her speculation was correct, but she was certain that the other two had no good intentions. Richard Lancaster carefully observed it once more, then nodded. Very similar. That year, father went hunting and unexpectedly encountered a dying man huddled by the cliff, clinging tightly to a rock, claiming to have been framed and begging father to save him. Because the accompanying imperial physician discovered that the man had a highly contagious disease, he didn't allow father to help. To prevent the man from infecting others, father was forced to give the heartless order to push him down the cliff. Olivia Carter stood beside them, listening with furrowed brows. Was that all? Frederick Lancaster then continued, but later, the imperial physician explained the truth to father, that the man didn't have a contagious disease, but rather the physician lacked the necessary medicinal ingredients. Even if he had been rescued, he would certainly have died while searching for the medicine. Instead of letting him suffer further, it was better to give him a quick end. Theodore Lancaster stared at Richard Lancaster and continued, father grieved for a long time over this matter and even ate vegetarian food for 3 days. Because of this, the Empress Dowager and the Empress also chanted scriptures in the Buddhist hall for half a month to atone for father's sins. Olivia Carter suddenly understood. So that was it. The Emperor had unintentionally committed murder, so the appearance of this wooden stake was clearly meant to remind him of the mistake he had once made. Bringing this matter up on the Emperor's birthday was clearly intended to make him vent his anger on Richard Lancaster. Richard Lancaster listened to his two brothers' lively discussion, his eyebrows furrowing slightly. If that's the case, why would you want to present this to father? Wouldn't it be touching upon his pain? Olivia Carter sighed in relief, thankful that Richard Lancaster wasn't a complete fool. Frederick Lancaster and Theodore Lancaster exchanged glances, chuckling insincerely, masking their malicious intent with strained smiles as they nudged Richard Lancaster closer to the wooden stake. Third brother, consider this, father has always aspired to be a wise and benevolent ruler, his name etched in history. He would never tolerate any blemish on his legacy. Yet, this matter remains a thorn in his side, a wound that festers. However, avoidance doesn't solve the problem, it only buries it deeper, forever gnawing at him, disturbing his sleep, and fueling his anxieties about how history will judge him. Frederick Lancaster spoke with such persuasive guile that Olivia Carter began to worry whether Richard Lancaster would actually heed their advice and present the stake as a gift to the Emperor. Theodore Lancaster chimed in, therefore, third brother, present this to father. As the saying goes, lie on thorns and taste gall. This is merely an opportunity for father to emulate the ancients. Seeing this will serve as a constant reminder of his past mistakes, urging him to govern with integrity, to be discerning, and to refrain from unjustly harming innocent lives. Olivia Carter seethed with anger. These two treacherous villains were spinning lies right in front of her. She wanted to intervene and pull Richard Lancaster back, but as an outsider, any rash action might result in false accusations, which wouldn't be worth the risk. While Olivia Carter hesitated, Richard Lancaster declared, if this is such a fine gift, why don't you two brothers present it to father? I've already chosen my gift for him. Not only did Frederick and Theodore Lancaster's faces darken in surprise, but Olivia Carter was also taken aback. What? Just moments ago, he was agonizing in his study over what to gift the Emperor, and now he suddenly had something. Olivia Carter suspected this was due to the Crown Prince and Sixth Prince's relentless pressure, forcing Richard Lancaster to fabricate a gift on the spot. Oh. Third brother, you surprise us. If you've already chosen a gift, bring it forth for Theodore and me to examine. We can help you determine if it suits father's taste. Frederick Lancaster, ever brazen, said with a wide smile, simultaneously signaling his attendant to discreetly remove the wooden stake. He was clearly afraid Richard Lancaster would cling to it. Olivia Carter bit her lip. It was done. He had spoken too loudly to retract his statement. Could he simply choose a random gift and claim it was for the Emperor? Wouldn't that invite ridicule? Olivia Carter worried for Richard Lancaster but didn't forget to observe Nurse Zhang's reactions. She noticed that whenever the Crown Prince gave an order, Nurse Zhang was the first to eagerly assist. While seemingly the zeal of a loyal servant, from another perspective, Olivia Carter couldn't help but question her true allegiance. Richard Lancaster summoned Henry Cole, fetch the gift I prepared for father from my study. His study? Olivia Carter couldn't recall seeing any gift when she observed the changes in the study. Henry Cole departed immediately. Frederick and Theodore Lancaster exchanged glances, settling back with smug anticipation playing at the corners of their mouths. Olivia Carter glanced anxiously towards Richard Lancaster, their eyes meeting. As if sensing her worry, Richard Lancaster offered a gentle smile, signaling her to be at ease. Olivia Carter found Richard Lancaster increasingly enigmatic. One moment he seemed manipulated, about to fall into a trap, the next he effortlessly turned the tables, achieving an improbable victory. Henry Cole returned, carrying a brocade box wrapped in gold silk. Opened, it revealed a pale green interior, translucent as jade, gleaming and pure. Outwardly impressive, its contents remained a mystery. Richard Lancaster gently opened the box, releasing a refreshing fragrance that filled the hall with an elegant, lingering scent. Olivia Carter was instantly captivated. All eyes were on Richard Lancaster as he drew out a gold silk cloth, wrapped it around his hands, and carefully lifted a white jade dragon from the box. Exquisitely carved against a backdrop of clouds, the dragon's body undulated gracefully. Though small enough to be held in Richard Lancaster's 2 hands, the dragon's head was raised high, mouth open, whiskers flowing amidst the clouds. Its powerful form and majestic presence spoke of a masterpiece, months in the making. Frederick Lancaster and Theodore Lancaster were visibly stunned by Richard Lancaster's offering. It would surely please the emperor, seen as the dragon's embodiment, but even the 2 brothers were immediately captivated. This was not the outcome they desired. They hadn't wanted Richard Lancaster to earn the emperor's favor. The situation was spiraling beyond their control. Frederick Lancaster stepped forward, laughing heartily. "I never expected such thoughtfulness from our 3rd brother. This soaring dragon is the perfect symbol for our Eastern Victory nation. Father will surely be delighted." Theodore Lancaster also approached, his gaze fixed on the jade dragon. "3rd brother, you are truly remarkable. Even the Crown Prince and I couldn't have conceived of such a gift. Such ingenuity from you is rare indeed." Olivia Carter, though surprised, felt only contempt for the 2 princes. Their outward praise masked a deep jealousy. As Frederick Lancaster and Theodore Lancaster drew closer, Olivia Carter sensed something amiss. Before she could react, Frederick Lancaster, without asking Richard Lancaster's permission, reached out and took the jade dragon with his bare hands. He and Theodore Lancaster began to handle it carelessly, showering it with insincere praise. Olivia Carter watched, her heart leaping into her throat each time the jade dragon nearly slipped from their grasp. She glared at Richard Lancaster, annoyed that he wasn't protecting his own offering. Richard Lancaster had intended to intervene, but Frederick Lancaster blocked his path. He opened his mouth to speak, but ultimately retreated to his seat, helplessly watching the 2 princes toy with the dragon. Olivia Carter whispered, "Get it back. If they break it, what will you present to the emperor?" At this point, Olivia Carter wasn't even bothered to dwell on his deception. He'd clearly already decided on the emperor's gift, yet he'd deliberately lied, making her visit his princely residence multiple times. Not only was she disrespected by the servants, but she was also falsely accused by Vanessa Young. It was fortunate she was magnanimous, otherwise, the fate of their engagement would still be uncertain. Faced with Olivia Carter's reproaches, Richard Lancaster not only ignored them but also murmured, "Didn't I say I'd show you a good play? I can't go back on my word." This cryptic remark left Olivia Carter dumbfounded. He had indeed said that before entering the main hall, but she thought he was joking. She hadn't expected him to take it seriously. But what did that have to do with the birthday gift at hand? Before Olivia Carter could fully process this, 2 shrill screams pierced the air, followed by the sounds of shattering jade, a crash, a crack, as the jade dragon tumbled to the ground, splintering into countless pieces. Heavens! Olivia Carter jumped up, startled, staring at the shattered jade dragon on the floor, then turned a regretful gaze towards Richard Lancaster. See? She'd told him to be careful, and now the jade dragon was broken. What were they going to do? But Richard Lancaster didn't seem to care. Instead, he gestured with his eyes for Olivia Carter to look at Frederick Lancaster and Theodore Lancaster. Olivia Carter, bewildered, followed Richard Lancaster's gaze and was shocked to discover that red welts had erupted on Frederick Lancaster and Theodore Lancaster's faces, necks, and hands. The 2 leaped up, yelling, scratching frantically. The more they scratched, the more the welt spread, the scratched areas instantly swelling into large, angry patches. Richard Lancaster quickly rose, feigning confusion as he looked at Frederick Lancaster and Theodore Lancaster, as if clueless, and asked loudly, "Eldest brother, 6th brother, what's wrong with you 2? Frederick Lancaster glared furiously at Richard Lancaster, gritting his teeth, "What did you do to the jade dragon? Why are we breaking out in these welts?" Chapter 21, delight. Richard Lancaster feigned innocence. Eldest brother, what are you talking about? There's nothing on the Jade Dragon. Theodore Lancaster, wincing in pain, hopped around scratching frantically while angrily addressing Richard Lancaster, third brother. You're audacious. How dare you lay a hand on His Highness the Crown Prince? If father finds out, you'll be in deep trouble. Threats were easy to make. Theodore Lancaster clearly hadn't grasped the gravity of the situation. Olivia Carter couldn't help but scoff, watching the two panicked figures with amusement. She said coldly, "Sixth Prince, you're certainly calculating. But if you report this to the Emperor, won't the incident of someone falling into the ravine also come to light? How will you and His Highness the Crown Prince explain yourselves then?" Outwardly, it seemed like she was concerned for Theodore Lancaster and Frederick Lancaster, but everyone knew this was a veiled threat, a more potent one at that. Richard Lancaster, whether intentionally or not, added fuel to the fire. Although I truly didn't put anything on the Jade Dragon and don't know why eldest brother and sixth brother have these welts, I'll present this wooden stake to father as a token of your goodwill and inform him of your kind intentions, to compensate for today's unintentional mishap. Richard Lancaster's words dripped with sincerity, his face a mask of remorse. Theodore Lancaster and Frederick Lancaster, however, jolted at his words, their agonizing itches momentarily forgotten. Exchanging glances, they understood this humiliation must be swallowed. Dejected, they departed under the hurried cover of their attendants. If the public were to witness the Crown Prince and the Sixth Prince in such a sorry state, their authority would be irreparably damaged, not to mention the inevitable whispers and open mockery. Though Theodore Lancaster and Frederick Lancaster often flaunted their princely status before Richard Lancaster, securing influential and even irreplaceable positions within the court, they would never do anything to damage the royal family's reputation, disgrace their father, or become public laughingstocks. The consequences would fall squarely on their shoulders, a path their cunning minds would never choose. Olivia Carter watched their hasty retreat, a long-suppressed smile finally blooming on her face. Turning back to Richard Lancaster, she saw him staring at the shattered dragon jade on the ground, regret and helplessness etched on his face. Olivia Carter's laughter abruptly ceased. Clearing her throat, she inquired, will it take long to replace?" Richard Lancaster nodded absently. "It took 3 months for a craftsman to carve this. I didn't expect it to be sacrificed so quickly." Olivia Carter sighed beside him. 3 months. Recreating it in time seemed impossible. Recalling Theodore and Frederick's misery as the rash tormented them, a smile tugged at Olivia Carter's lips, a sight that didn't escape Richard Lancaster's notice. "Are you gloating, or mocking me?" Richard Lancaster asked, his brow furrowed as he looked at Olivia Carter. Olivia Carter's smile froze. She stared intently at Richard Lancaster, catching a fleeting glint of amusement and mischief in his eyes. A realization dawned on Olivia Carter. She looked at Richard Lancaster quizzically. "Your Highness mentioned you had a spectacle for me. Was it this?" A radiant smile bloomed on her face. If so, it was truly cathartic, incredibly satisfying. Olivia Carter didn't bother hiding her exhilaration or the sheer glee she derived from the previous scene. Richard Lancaster looked bewildered. "I was talking about my dragon jade." "What are you talking about?" Olivia Carter froze, then understanding dawned. Richard Lancaster wasn't referring to the rash, but the broken jade. Her smile vanished. She'd been mistaken. But what about the amusement in his eyes? A touch of annoyance colored her voice. "I wouldn't dare mock your Highness." Hearing the displeasure in Olivia Carter's voice, Richard Lancaster gestured for the shards to be cleared away. He settled beside her and asked softly, "Have you truly had your fill of amusement?" Olivia Carter, thoroughly confused by his alternating cluelessness and perceptiveness, frowned deeper. "What are you trying to ask?" she asked, exasperated. Richard Lancaster, seeing her looking like a disgruntled little wife, burst into laughter. "I did say I wanted to help you vent your anger. Seeing you so amused earlier, it seems I succeeded. Olivia Carter eyed Richard Lancaster with an unreadable expression, thinking, this man, outwardly foolish, yet when dealing with adversaries, he has his own methods, making them suffer losses without a word. And he still feigns innocence. Sometimes brilliant, sometimes simple, what is Richard Lancaster's true nature? Richard Lancaster waved a hand in front of Olivia Carter's face. Whatcha thinkin' about? His alluring peach blossom eyes blinked. If Olivia Carter hadn't known his feelings for her were merely platonic, she would have truly believed he was smitten. What do you think was smeared on the jade dragon? It caused both the Crown Prince and the Sixth Prince to have allergic reactions. Olivia Carter raised an eyebrow at Richard Lancaster. Even without knowing who he truly was, she could at least test his cunning. Richard Lancaster feigned ignorance again. Nothing was applied. How would I know why they had a reaction? I'm not their personal maid. That dark humor wasn't funny at all. Olivia Carter, unable to extract anything from Richard Lancaster, pressed further, then why did you wrap the jade dragon in a silk cloth when you carried it, instead of touching it directly? Richard Lancaster was about to speak when Olivia Carter cut him off. Don't tell me it's because it was a gift for His Majesty, so you were being respectful. Jade artifacts are different. Such soft, golden silk makes it easier to drop them accidentally. Even if you want to make an excuse, at least make it convincing. Olivia Carter admitted she was being somewhat unreasonable, but in front of Richard Lancaster, she always lost control. Perhaps it was because she was certain he wouldn't look at her with the same malice as Theodore Lancaster and Frederick Lancaster, or perhaps because she couldn't bear revealing her hidden sides to him, so she used this opportunity to vent her frustrations. Richard Lancaster's smile was full of indulgence, but his words left Olivia Carter speechless. I didn't think much of it at the time. I just did what felt right. As for what happened after, even I don't know. Olivia Carter, surprised by Richard Lancaster's ability to play dumb, asked bluntly, so what good show did you promise me? Don't say it was the jade dragon, that thing was useless. Seizing the key point, Richard Lancaster still evaded. So, tell me, were you happy seeing their reactions just now? Happy? So what? Olivia Carter looked at Richard Lancaster warily, unsure what he was planning. Richard Lancaster nodded. Actually, when I said I'd help you vent your anger, I wasn't confident at all and had no concrete plan. Who knew such an interesting scene would unfold? It truly wasn't in vain that I boasted. Richard Lancaster spoke with a serious and innocent expression, but Olivia Carter saw through his harmless facade and was completely immune, not bothered in the slightest. She knew perfectly well that he was feigning naivete. Olivia Carter considered retrieving a piece of the jade dragon to verify Richard Lancaster's words and confront him in public. But after thinking it over, she felt it was too calculating and childish, so she let it go. Fine, you tricked me. Now what? The jade dragon is gone. We really have to rethink His Majesty's birthday gift. Currently, the most important thing was to reconsider the Emperor's gift. Olivia Carter still knew her priorities. Richard Lancaster nodded thoughtfully, a look of troubled contemplation on his face, neatly dodging Olivia Carter's unspoken accusation of, "You tricked me." However, Olivia Carter's visit to the Third Prince's residence today and the ensuing events gave her a new perspective on Richard Lancaster. The masked man's words were true, Richard Lancaster wasn't truly weak. He had his own methods of dealing with those who attacked him. At least, the Crown Prince and the Sixth Prince had suffered crushing defeats at his hands. And this facade of frailty was, without a doubt, his best protection, shielding him from countless troubles. Of course, his crippled body and low status among the princes were also key factors. Your Highness, I have a question. If you don't mind, I hope you can answer truthfully. Olivia Carter looked intently at Richard Lancaster and asked. Richard Lancaster, lost in thought, his gaze unfocused, replied almost absent-mindedly, all right. Olivia Carter paused, her mind racing through various possible answers, each with a pre-planned response. Finally, she asked, "Did Vanessa Young, the person in your residence, truly die unexpectedly?" Richard Lancaster remained silent, as if in a trance. Olivia Carter raised her voice and asked again, "Your Highness, did Vanessa Young truly die unexpectedly?" Richard Lancaster, startled, as if waking from a dream, looked at Olivia Carter in confusion. "What did you just say?" Olivia Carter's patience wore thin. Faced with someone perpetually on a different wavelength, how could she discern his true thoughts and his true nature? But Olivia Carter couldn't allow any potentially dangerous individuals near her. Previously, Richard Lancaster hadn't been under suspicion, but now he was on her watch list. Vanessa Young didn't die unexpectedly, did she? Olivia Carter's voice softened, tinged with helplessness. The physician examined her. "It's true. Why do you keep dwelling on this?" Richard Lancaster replied, his tone unchanged. Not expecting anything from this answer, Olivia Carter sighed softly. "Then you also won't admit that you applied some sort of allergen to knock long, will you?" Richard Lancaster responded stiffly, "I said I didn't, so naturally, I didn't. If you don't trust me like this, why do you still want to help me?" Determined to force Olivia Carter into another round of internal analysis, Olivia Carter, reluctant to think, suddenly remembered something and asked, "Where's Steward Zhang Mama? Why is she nowhere to be seen even after the Crown Prince left? She hasn't even cleaned up the mess." It sounded like a complaint, but anyone could hear the underlying meaning. Richard Lancaster looked intently at Olivia Carter. "I feel like something's off with you." Olivia Carter retorted, "I feel like something's off with everyone in your princely residence." The two stared at each other. Olivia Carter could clearly see the deep amusement and probing look in Richard Lancaster's eyes, which further irritated her. Clearly, the one who needed probing wasn't her, but the strangely behaving servants in his residence, like Zhang Mama. #### Chapter 22, Self-Deception. Do you genuinely not know, or are you simply too indulgent with them? You entrusted the sixth prince's handkerchief to the steward. How could she be so careless as to let a maid accidentally burn it? Why is she arrogant and overbearing towards me, making things difficult both subtly and openly, yet so diligent and subservient towards the crown prince? How long do you intend to deceive yourself?" Realizing her agitation, Olivia Carter tried to compose herself and was about to speak when she saw Richard Lancaster rise to leave. "Where are you going?" Olivia Carter blurted out. "Seeing you so upset, I'm going for a walk. Maybe when you're no longer angry, I'll come back and discuss the gifts with you." Richard Lancaster rolled his eyes, uttering irrelevant words. Olivia Carter grew even angrier. Richard Lancaster was missing the point entirely. Did he even understand what she was saying? "No need. You can figure out the gifts yourself. I'm not in a good mood and need to rest. Just send someone to fetch me on His Majesty's birthday. I'll keep my promise." Olivia Carter's displeasure was evident on her face, her voice cold. She lifted her foot to leave. Richard Lancaster panicked, immediately blocking Olivia Carter's path, almost firmly stating, "I'll do whatever you say, just help me." Olivia Carter and Richard Lancaster were only a head apart in height. Now, with Richard Lancaster blocking her way in his haste, they nearly collided, the distance between them instantly shortening. Olivia Carter's nose almost brushed against Richard Lancaster's chest, and a feeling of warmth immediately spread to her ears. "I want you to stay." Richard Lancaster looked down at Olivia Carter, who was practically leaning against his chest, his voice gentle, containing sincerity in softness. Olivia Carter felt the heat in her face and ears. Without looking up, she mumbled, "Will you really do anything I say?" Richard Lancaster didn't answer. The flames of anger, momentarily suppressed by the unexpected situation, reignited within Olivia Carter at Richard Lancaster's silence. She abruptly looked up, meeting his deep, affectionate gaze. In that stunned moment, she heard him softly say, I'll do anything you say. Olivia Carter froze briefly, realizing what she was doing, cursing herself inwardly, then resolutely declared, "All right, then take me to Vanessa Young's room." Disbelief crossed Richard Lancaster's face, his voice tinged with doubt. "Why do you want to go to Vanessa Young's room?" Olivia Carter didn't answer, instead using his previous words against him. "You said you'd do anything I say. Why are you already regretting it after just the first request?" Richard Lancaster looked troubled, frowning slightly. "It's not that I won't let you go, but entering her room less than a day after Vanessa Young's death is disrespectful to the deceased and brings bad luck." Olivia Carter, despite her dislike for Vanessa Young, saw no need to continue blaming or venting her anger on the corpse to relieve yesterday's frustrations. Faced with Richard Lancaster's misunderstanding of her pettiness, Olivia Carter remained surprisingly calm. In life, Richard Lancaster had pampered Vanessa Young endlessly, and even in death, he protected her body and reputation. Such a man, though she had considered him weak yesterday, now seemed to possess some admirable qualities. "Don't worry, I won't do anything to Vanessa Young's body. I just want to take a look." Olivia Carter reaffirmed her intention. Richard Lancaster looked at her, his eyes scrutinizing, before finally speaking. "Do you still not believe that Vanessa Young died unexpectedly and want to verify it yourself?" Olivia Carter, struck by Richard Lancaster's sharp perception, cautiously observed his seemingly innocent face, searching for any exploitable weakness. Unfortunately, whether due to Richard Lancaster's deep concealment or her own overthinking, she found nothing beyond that naivete and the occasional glint of shrewdness and profound meaning in his eyes. Olivia Carter decided on directness. Common decency dictates affording the deceased a clear explanation for their death, rather than a vague conclusion of sudden demise. Even the dead deserve an explanation. Richard Lancaster's frown deepened. What explanation? Olivia Carter didn't beat around the bush with him. This man, it was impossible to tell when he was rationally intelligent and when he was like a naive, even childish, infant. Sudden death can be attributed to internal or external factors, or, of course, a combination of both. What I want to bring to the deceased, is a concrete explanation for this sudden passing. Olivia Carter fixed a serious gaze on Richard Lancaster. "And then what?" Richard Lancaster pressed further. Olivia Carter paused, taken aback. "And then?" "There is no and then. The sole benefit is that when you report to Her Highness the Empress, you won't be given a hard time. Doesn't she always disapprove of you? If she were to punish you over this matter, you'd have no justification. Matters that can be clearly explained, why leave them ambiguous? It avoids a lot of unnecessary trouble." Olivia Carter believed her reasoning was sound. Standing in Richard Lancaster's shoes, she had truly put in considerable thought, and this became her justification for persuading him to take her along. Richard Lancaster's furrowed brow relaxed, but his complexion remained poor. In fact, it could be said that his expression had been unpleasant ever since Olivia Carter mentioned wanting to see consort Vanessa Young's chambers. Richard Lancaster turned and left the main hall, Olivia Carter close behind, a sense of accomplishment fueling her excitement. She was pleased with her skillful words and Richard Lancaster's acquiescence. As they passed the artificial rockery in the rear garden, a pungent, burning smell wafted towards them. It was nearing midday. Who would dare burn something here? Olivia Carter's thoughts naturally drifted to the Chishi festival on the 15th day of the 7th lunar month, the optimal time for ancestor worship. Calculating the time, it was less than a month away from the 15th. Could it be related to ancestor worship? Burning joss paper for the deceased was strictly forbidden within the imperial palace, a rule that extended even to the prince's residence. Consort Vanessa Young had passed away just yesterday, and today someone was burning offerings for her. It seemed someone still remembered her. Richard Lancaster, also catching the scent, glanced towards the rockery and then at Olivia Carter. Olivia Carter nodded, and they both proceeded towards the rockery. Soon, a faint voice, like the buzzing of a mosquito, reached their ears. "My Lady Vanessa Young, it's not that this servant doesn't want to help you, but I truly don't want to get involved in these murky waters. You have no burdens, but this servant has a family, young and old, to care for. You have the Empress's backing and fear nothing, but this servant is merely a lowly maid, with nothing but this deed of sale to my name." Hearing this, Olivia Carter unconsciously glanced at Richard Lancaster, but saw a bewildered expression on his face, as if he had absolutely no idea what the maid was talking about. A vague sense of something fracturing stirred within Olivia Carter. It seemed she might find the answers she sought right here, without needing to go to Vanessa Young's room. The maid's voice was remarkably calm, devoid of any grief or remembrance for the deceased. The implication of her words sounded more like an apology. "His Highness, the third prince, is a good man. How could I bear to betray him? He was always so thoughtful and doting towards Mistress Vanessa Young, cherishing her like a treasure. Any woman would be moved. Yet, she continued to serve the Empress, never truly regarding the third prince as her husband. Only after her passing do I dare to speak these truths, hoping she might find enlightenment on the other side. If she couldn't live honestly in this world, may she do so in the next. Committing so many unconscionable acts will eventually lead to retribution." A sudden chill ran down Olivia Carter's spine, raising goosebumps on her arms, and she couldn't help but shiver. The maid's words, though veiled, were clear to Olivia Carter. Everything had been revealed, there was no need to visit Vanessa Young's room. Richard Lancaster was about to speak, but Olivia Carter stopped him with a gesture, and the two quietly left the rockery. Olivia Carter strolled pensively through the back garden, silent, while Richard Lancaster followed, equally quiet. "Did you hear that?" Olivia Carter asked without turning around. Richard Lancaster's voice was tinged with confusion. "Hear what?" Olivia Carter stopped, turning to fix Richard Lancaster with a stare. "The maid's words just now, you heard them, didn't you?" Richard Lancaster hesitated, considering for a moment before replying, "Behind the rockery?" "Yes, I heard." "And what do you make of it?" Olivia Carter pressed, her unwavering gaze fixed on Richard Lancaster, giving him no room to evade. But to her disappointment, Richard Lancaster maintained his air of incomprehension, as if entirely oblivious to the answer she sought, or perhaps to the very meaning of her words. She was Vanessa Young's maid, named Han Ni. Richard Lancaster seemed able to offer only this. Olivia Carter's anger flared again, but seeing Richard Lancaster's apparent discomfort under her furious gaze, she suddenly felt the absurdity of her actions. She was arguing with a man whose true nature was elusive, who clearly refused to reveal his true face. Just as the masked man had said, she would rather believe that Richard Lancaster genuinely had his own struggles than that he was deceiving her as he deceived others. Suddenly, Olivia Carter was startled by this thought. Then again, even if Richard Lancaster was deceiving her, so what? Their relationship was merely one of mutual exploitation. Why should she be entangled with him? Yet, an inexplicable, almost indefinable emotion lingered between them. Olivia Carter unconsciously sought justification. Previously, she felt Richard Lancaster's status was too low among the princes, and a chivalrous spirit compelled her to repeatedly enact the damsel in distress trope. Now, it was the same, she was merely indignant on his behalf. The words of the maid, Han Ni, were clear. Vanessa Young worked for the Empress, yet resided in the third prince's residence. Thus, the one she betrayed must be Richard Lancaster. However, Richard Lancaster was considered a cripple. What valuable secrets could he possess to be betrayed? Gazing at Richard Lancaster's handsome face, Olivia Carter mused that, ignoring his naive expression and flaws, his occasional flashes of brilliance and intellect made him a rare and outstanding figure compared to the other princes. Perhaps the Empress had inadvertently noticed this unusual distinction, sparking her worry. Did she fear he would join the succession struggle, becoming a formidable opponent? Upon careful analysis, this seemed the only reason for the Empress's elaborate scheme. In that case, Vanessa Young's sudden death merely meant the loss of a pawn for the Empress. If she interrogated Richard Lancaster, prompting him to investigate further, she risked self-incrimination. The Empress wouldn't commit such folly. Could it be? Olivia Carter looked at Richard Lancaster again. Was this the real reason he wasn't seriously investigating Vanessa Young's death? Because he knew, he chose not to prolong the matter to catch the big fish. Accusing the Empress without irrefutable evidence would be futile, as the Emperor wouldn't readily judge. Given a chance, the Empress would ruthlessly retaliate against Richard Lancaster. Considering this, Richard Lancaster's decision seemed prudent. Yet, Olivia Carter found Richard Lancaster increasingly enigmatic. What was his true nature? Chapter 23, Extermination of 9 Clans, What's Wrong? You thought burning paper money in the residence was inappropriate? I was about to stop her, but you stopped me. Richard Lancaster explained. Olivia Carter forced a smile, her eyes catching sight of a servant in dark blue sweeping the courtyard, gradually approaching them. Who is he? Olivia Carter abruptly asked. Richard Lancaster glanced at the person. He's someone's 6th brother brought, saying he's both deaf and mute. 6th brother had many servants, so he sent him here since we have fewer. Theodore Lancaster sent him. Olivia Carter's gaze sharpened, fixated on the servant's sweeping motions, lost in thought. While Olivia Carter only knew basic martial arts, she could still recognize the habits and characteristics of a trained martial artist. Ordinary people sweeping took small steps, as it was their job. Even if they took longer strides, they couldn't maintain it due to lack of leg strength training. Martial artists, however, had firm, steady steps, maintaining long strides for extended periods. Such proficiency required training. As the person drew closer, Olivia Carter's gaze fixed on their hands. Calloused, short, thick fingers with dirt ingrained beneath the nails would mark someone accustomed to manual labor. Yet, this person's hands bore none of those signs. Olivia Carter smiled, turning to Richard Lancaster with a sudden remark. So, he's a servant brought by His Highness, the 6th Prince. He lost the wager earlier, didn't he, and staked this servant as collateral? Saying I could kill or dissect him as I pleased. As she spoke, her eyes remained fixed on the person's figure and expression. Sure enough, upon hearing her words, the person visibly stiffened, a look of disbelief and fleeting panic crossing their face. Your Highness, the 3rd Prince, consider how I might be compensated for this injustice. His Highness, the 6th Prince, is clearly shirking responsibility, yet I can't utter a word of refusal. Olivia Carter withdrew her gaze from Richard Lancaster, sighing regretfully. Alas, what use is a deaf-mute to me? A dog would be more practical, at least capable of guarding the house, loyal to one master. Olivia Carter's words dripped with innuendo, emphasizing deaf and mute. Waiting until Richard Lancaster frowned, she turned and departed. The sound of Richard Lancaster's footsteps close behind evoked a pang of sorrow within Olivia Carter. That deaf-mute from earlier was clearly faking, likely another of Theodore Lancaster's plants placed beside Richard Lancaster. Considering this, even Nurse Zhang, always so respectful to His Highness, the Crown Prince, might be leaning on Frederick Lancaster, a true example of biting the hand that feeds. Olivia Carter's gaze swept over the servants passing by, suddenly feeling as though each wore a label, none of which read Richard Lancaster. Constantly monitored, without a single trusted confidant, Richard Lancaster must be terribly lonely. This thought brought a stinging sensation to Olivia Carter's nose. Compared to the disdain, exclusion, and oppression she endured, Richard Lancaster's plight seemed far more dire. She, at least, could seek freedom, but Richard Lancaster, a royal prince, how could he simply shed his status and wander the world? Such an act would likely invite assassination. Whether he advanced or retreated, Richard Lancaster's path was a dead end. Olivia Carter, what's wrong? Weren't you going to Vanessa Young's room? Why are you leaving so hastily? Richard Lancaster hurried after Olivia Carter, bewildered by the young lady's speed. Olivia Carter stopped, turning back. It's getting late. Carter Estate is in disarray, and you'll have to come up with your own gift. With that, Olivia Carter boarded Henry Cole's waiting carriage, drawing the curtains. Her voice, calm and emotionless, instructed, "To Carter Estate, Brother Henry Cole. I apologize for the trouble." Henry Cole, gnawing on a carrot, found Olivia Carter's hurried emergence strange, followed by his master running out, his expression a mixture of helplessness and worry. Then Olivia Carter's calling him Big Brother Henry Cole completely made Henry Cole spit out the carrot in his mouth. He stared blankly at Richard Lancaster, seeking his instruction with his eyes. Richard Lancaster composed his reluctant and worried expression, his face becoming smooth and unreadable as he gave Henry Cole a slight nod. Only then did Henry Cole spur the horse and carriage, leaving in a cloud of dust. Richard Lancaster watched the carriage disappear into the distance, a vague worry lingering in his heart, yet he couldn't deny a certain joy mixed within. The more Olivia Carter knew, the better she understood him, and soon she would discover his true self. However, in the current chaotic situation, Richard Lancaster didn't want to drag her into this vortex. But they were about to be married, and who wouldn't desire openness, facing difficulties together, or at least, not feeling so alone. Richard Lancaster calmed the emotions stirred by Olivia Carter and turned to enter his study. On the third row of the wooden bookshelf, an inconspicuous wooden block protruded from the gap between the books. Upon touching it, a hidden mechanism was activated, and the bookshelf slowly slid to the left, revealing a deep, dark passage. Richard Lancaster emerged from the passage not long after, the gloom between his eyebrows gone, replaced by a gentle smile. As for Olivia Carter, when she returned to Carter Estate, just as she predicted, Miranda Nightshade had been released by Chancellor Carter. Due to the preparations for the Emperor's birthday celebration, Chancellor Carter was in charge of the event this time, or perhaps it was the Empress's decree. When Olivia Carter arrived at Carter Estate, Chancellor Carter had already gone to the palace. Only Miranda Nightshade, Evelyn Carter, and Jasper Carter, who was so frightened that he hid in his room, refusing to come out, remained. Inevitably, as soon as she stepped into the hall, Olivia Carter sensed the tense atmosphere, thick as gunpowder. Miranda Nightshade sat in the main seat, Evelyn Carter standing beside her with a hand on her shoulder, a clear act of provocation and dominance. Olivia Carter, of course, recognized this. She found a chair, sat down gracefully, and tapped her fingers rhythmically on the table, the steady sound blending with her somewhat lazy voice. "Mother and second sister, you seem quite free. Shouldn't you be preparing birthday gifts for the Emperor? Are you done yet?" Miranda Nightshade, looking at Olivia Carter's face, identical to Amelia Roberts, gritted her teeth and pointed at her. "You killed her, and we bear the consequences. Carter Estate has become like this because of you. Are you satisfied now? Jasper Carter is still crying in his room, refusing to eat or sleep, and he's terrified of his father." Olivia Carter signaled for a servant to bring tea, wanting to soothe her throat before arguing with her. "No one is allowed to go. Whoever dares to bring tea or water to Olivia Carter today will have no place in Carter Estate in the future." Miranda Nightshade clearly wanted to push Olivia Carter into a situation of being scorned by everyone. After all, before Chancellor Carter wrote the divorce letter, Miranda Nightshade was still the mistress in charge of Carter Estate. Everyone lowered their heads, not daring to look at Miranda Nightshade, nor at Olivia Carter. Everyone knew how fearsome Olivia Carter was. Before, let alone offending her, even bullying her wasn't something to worry about being punished for, it was even praised. But now, Olivia Carter's power surpassed even Miranda Nightshade's. It was truly a dilemma. Obeying either one wouldn't lead to a good outcome. Clearly aware that Miranda Nightshade was targeting her, Olivia Carter, unwilling to trouble the servant, waved her hand dismissively. "Go on, I won't drink any more." Unexpectedly, Miranda Nightshade pressed further. Seeing the servant about to leave, she yelled, "Stop. Did I give you permission to leave? In Carter Estate, who's in charge, her or me?" Olivia Carter found this amusing, a hint of mockery in her voice. "Mother, out of respect for you being the temporary mistress of Carter Estate, I'll call you Mother. A word of advice, even tigers fall from grace. Those who are too arrogant should be wary of retribution." Miranda Nightshade trembled with rage at Olivia Carter's words, looking towards Evelyn Carter for support. Though Evelyn Carter was born beautiful and charming, she was no match for Miranda Nightshade's cunning and scheming. This was why, no matter the situation, Evelyn Carter always relied on Miranda Nightshade. Evelyn Carter, already harboring intense hatred for Olivia Carter, now hearing her insinuate such things about her mother, finally snapped. She marched towards Olivia Carter, hand raised to strike her across the face. Olivia Carter let out a cold snort, remaining motionless. The two maids beside her, however, were petrified by the scene, covering their mouths, nearly screaming. Seeing Evelyn Carter's hand about to connect, Olivia Carter swiftly caught it with one hand, twisting it forcefully. Evelyn Carter stumbled, nearly falling, her arm wrenched painfully, a scream escaping her lips as her face flushed crimson. "Olivia Carter, you insolent wretch! What do you think you're doing?" Miranda Nightshade leaped up furiously from her seat, taking several quick steps forward, but halted, frozen by Olivia Carter's icy glare. "If you want her to keep her arm, stay right there." Miranda Nightshade glared at Olivia Carter, seething with indignation. "Olivia Carter, don't forget, my daughter is the future concubine of the Crown Prince. If she's injured, the Emperor and the Crown Prince won't spare you." Miranda Nightshade had indeed learned to use the royal family as a threat. Olivia Carter laughed coldly inwardly, feigning doubt as she furrowed her brow. "Mother, I'm even more curious now. If second sister were to actually lose an arm, would the Crown Prince still want her?" At these words, Evelyn Carter's face paled drastically, her voice laced with tears as she pleaded with Miranda Nightshade for help. Miranda Nightshade hadn't expected Olivia Carter to be so fearless, her defiance only growing stronger at the mention of the Emperor. It seemed best to endure this for now, she could settle the score later. Seeing Evelyn Carter's tears streaming down her face, her sleeve twisted grotesquely, Miranda Nightshade knew Olivia Carter had used considerable force. She truly feared Olivia Carter might unknowingly cause serious harm. If Evelyn Carter's value diminished, she and Jasper Carter would truly become worthless in Carter Estate, their expulsion only a matter of time. No matter what, she couldn't lose Evelyn Carter as a pawn. "What are you standing there gawking for? Serve third miss some tea." Miranda Nightshade barked at the two stunned maids. The two maids hastily obeyed, scurrying out of the main hall. After dismissing the maids, Miranda Nightshade lowered her voice. "Olivia Carter, let Evelyn Carter go, and I'll make her apologize. You know Evelyn Carter has been spoiled since childhood, she's hot-headed and thoughtless. For the sake of Carter Estate standing in the imperial court, you must think carefully." Olivia Carter stared coldly at Miranda Nightshade, her grip unwavering. Miranda Nightshade recoiled from that chilling gaze, turning her face away, adding unwillingly, "If you truly harm Evelyn Carter, whether from your perspective or from the perspective of Evelyn Carter being rejected from the marriage, it will be extremely detrimental to Carter Estate. More seriously, it could be considered treason, punishable by death for 9 generations. Olivia Carter, have you no heart? Knows how to play the emotional card, indeed." Olivia Carter didn't bat an eye. "Mother, shouldn't you say these words in front of the servants, so they can plead with me too? That way, you can claim to be merciful. If I agree, it's thanks to your reasonable plea, if I don't, your kindness will be remembered by them. Isn't that even better? This monologue in front of me doesn't seem like your style at all." Olivia Carter, feeling even more emboldened, loosened her grip. Evelyn Carter, unable to regain her balance, fell to the ground. Chapter 24, The Scheme of Discord. Olivia Carter brushed her hand off in disgust and sat down leisurely. Miranda Nightshade hurried forward a few steps, bending down to check if Evelyn Carter had any injuries. Evelyn Carter sobbed and threw herself into Miranda Nightshade's arms. Miranda Nightshade gently comforted Evelyn Carter while glaring at Olivia Carter with resentment. A maid brought tea and pastries. Olivia Carter sipped her tea leisurely, calmly facing Miranda Nightshade's murderous gaze. "Dear mother, don't look at me like that. When I'm unhappy, I tend to do thoughtless things that affect others. You witnessed it yesterday." Olivia Carter, unconcerned about further fueling Miranda Nightshade and her daughter's hatred, didn't hesitate to utter this veiled threat. "Since the mask has been torn off, all that's left is the struggle." Currently, Olivia Carter was filled with fighting spirit. Initially, she thought ancient times would be incredibly boring, but unexpectedly, it was even more thrilling and exciting than her previous detective work. "Olivia Carter, don't get cocky. I'll show you the dire consequences of offending me." Miranda Nightshade's words were clearly gritted through her teeth, her distorted face making her already unattractive appearance even older and uglier. With such intense hatred, Miranda Nightshade was undoubtedly determined to resort to cruel measures. Olivia Carter sighed. The upcoming days at Carter Estate were certainly going to be turbulent. Olivia Carter shrugged indifferently, slowly finished her tea, and stood up, preparing to leave. "Where are you going?" Miranda Nightshade helped Evelyn Carter up, her eyes warily fixed on Olivia Carter, her voice laced with urgency and panic. Olivia Carter, amused, turned back reluctantly and tilted her head nonchalantly. "Lady Miranda Nightshade, do I have to report to you even when I'm going to the restroom?" Miranda Nightshade was speechless. Evelyn Carter, supported by her mother, was indignant and raged. "Mother, have someone follow her. From now on, wherever she goes, she must be followed. This woman is a jinx. Sooner or later, Carter Estate will fall into ruin in her hands." Evelyn Carter's anger at Olivia Carter made her speak without thinking, but Olivia Carter detected the ominous undertone. Not believing in the supernatural, she naturally disregarded Evelyn Carter's words. Miranda Nightshade glared at Evelyn Carter again, scolding, "You damn girl, what kind of devilish talk is that? The Carter Estate is vast and influential, and your father holds a high position. How could it collapse because of a little wench?" After saying that, she didn't forget to shoot Olivia Carter a resentful glare, clearly intending for Olivia Carter to hear those words. Mother and daughter, one with a darkened face, the other flushed, their words sharper than any song, Olivia Carter offered only a cold smile. Her eyes, holding a look that could devour them whole, she turned and left the foyer. Miranda Nightshade said that Jasper Carter, refusing food and drink, was so terrified he couldn't sleep. Out of favor with Chancellor Carter, the boy was naturally petrified by the murderous look in the old man's eyes. Olivia Carter hadn't meant to hurt Jasper Carter. Of everyone involved, he was the most innocent. If Miranda Nightshade and Evelyn Carter hadn't pushed the matter, Olivia Carter wouldn't have escalated things, exposing such a massive family secret before Chancellor Carter and inadvertently shattering a seemingly harmonious family. But then again, Chancellor Carter, despite his pride and sense of honor, ultimately chose power above all else. The green hat was merely a symbol of humiliation, his punishment of Miranda Nightshade, a fleeting burst of anger. Reason and ambition wouldn't allow him to make a decision that would invite the world's ridicule. Moreover, such a decision could cost him a pawn that helped secure his position in court. Chancellor Carter wasn't a fool. Miranda Nightshade, calculating his thoughts, placed all her hopes on Evelyn Carter. But what about Jasper Carter, the innocent caught in the crossfire? Miranda Nightshade couldn't bear it, nor could Evelyn Carter, their outrage centered solely on their own disadvantages. Neither truly considered Jasper Carter's plight. In Chancellor Carter's eyes, Jasper Carter was Butler Darkwood's son, unrelated to him, a constant reminder of Miranda Nightshade's betrayal. To Miranda Nightshade, Jasper Carter was proof of her betrayal of Chancellor Carter, a symbol of her shame. For Evelyn Carter, Jasper Carter was her half-brother, yet also the reason for Chancellor Carter's growing coldness towards her. Jasper Carter's existence was a burden to everyone, no one truly cared for him. Olivia Carter felt a pang of guilt towards Jasper Carter. She instructed the kitchen to prepare some light dishes and pastries, then carried them with a maid to Jasper Carter's door. Olivia Carter knocked softly. "Jasper Carter, it's your third sister. Open the door, I've brought you some treats," Olivia Carter said gently. Inside, the knock startled Jasper Carter from his drowsy state. He scrambled to the furthest corner of the bed, clutching himself, trembling, his face etched with fear. When there was no response, a sense of foreboding washed over Olivia Carter. She pushed at the door, but it was locked. Olivia Carter signaled the maid to step back. Gritting her teeth, she leveraged her position and forced the door open. Inside, the sound made Jasper Carter shriek. He pulled the covers over his head, curling into a tight ball, leaving no gap. Olivia Carter wasn't about to play tug-of-war with the boy. She wasn't good with children, especially not Miranda Nightshade's son, the young master who had once bullied her. Yet, driven by a lingering guilt, Olivia Carter maintained her composure. She nodded to the maid to set the food down and wait aside. Sitting at the table, ignoring the whimpers coming from beneath the blankets, she picked up a pastry and held it out. "Xiaoyu, did you make this cake?" Olivia Carter blinked, asking the maid beside her. The maid nodded, "Yes, I made it." "Who taught you this skill?" "Look at this sweet osmanthus cake, the fragrance is intoxicating, the sweetness permeates the heart, it must be delicious." Olivia Carter exaggerated her praise, then casually handed a piece to Xiaoyu. Xiaoyu was at a loss for what to do, but when she saw Olivia Carter's eyes gesturing towards the bed, she dared to accept it. Olivia Carter said with a slightly sour tone, "Such delicious food, it would be a waste to throw it away if someone doesn't want to eat it, so we might as well eat it for him." "Xiaoyu, you like sweet osmanthus cake, so these are yours, and the apple pies will be mine." "Let me see." Olivia Carter busied herself dividing the cakes, then paused for a moment, glancing at the blanket on the bed. The blanket revealed a small gap. Olivia Carter knew it was Jasper Carter peeking. He was still a child after all, which made Olivia Carter even more confident. "Oh, there's also my favorite hibiscus cake. Xiaoyu, your skills are truly exquisite, you must teach me how to make it in the future. Everyone says eating hibiscus cake can make you taller and stronger, see who dares to bully me then." Olivia Carter spoke seriously. Xiaoyu bit into the sweet osmanthus cake and covered her mouth, giggling. Glancing at Jasper Carter on the bed, he had already poked half his head out from under the blanket, his eyes fixed on the hibiscus cake, looking full of longing. Olivia Carter looked at the tray of light food, thinking that Jasper Carter hadn't eaten for 2 meals. If he ate something too greasy, it would be difficult to digest, while light food wouldn't increase the burden on his stomach, helping with digestion. Otherwise, improper eating could cause gastritis, and surely Miranda Nightshade and Evelyn Carter wouldn't let her off the hook. Chancellor Carter would also have a reason to punish her, vent his anger, and settle the score. As if, how could Olivia Carter put herself in such danger? Olivia Carter picked up a spoon and scooped some porridge from the blue porcelain bowl, asking Xiaoyu, "What kind of porridge is this?" Xiaoyu also understood that Olivia Carter was using reverse psychology, her voice raised, cooperating in her reply, "Third young miss, this is shrimp porridge, not only delicious but also especially nutritious. Madam once instructed that it can only be eaten on special occasions." Olivia Carter pretended to be regretful, "Tisk tsk, such a rare delicacy, it's a pity Jasper Carter isn't eating it. Someone as unfortunate as me today is also thanks to Jasper Carter's blessing to be able to try it. If he doesn't eat it, then I'll eat it in his place." Jasper Carter on the bed, upon hearing this, immediately threw off the blanket, glared at Olivia Carter, and said firmly, "You can't eat it." Olivia Carter and Xiaoyu were both stunned, looking at Jasper Carter in surprise. "I won't let you eat it." Jasper Carter repeated, but still remained on the bed, refusing to get down, only speaking to Olivia Carter with resentment. "See, like mother, like son, even when struck down, their nature remains unchanged, the habit of bullying the meek is still the same. Olivia Carter felt that being able to get him to come down and eat was already the utmost kindness, originally thinking that disciplining him once would make him obedient, who knew he was a good-for-nothing who couldn't be helped. Olivia Carter, too weary for arguments, acknowledged his success and, ignoring his glare, pointed to another dish. "Oh, and this for Jasper Carter too? Isn't this something served only at royal banquets? I'm so fortunate to try it. Xiao Yu, you're truly skilled. You must teach me sometime." Xiao Yu gave a shy smile. It was just stir-fried vegetables and eggs, elevated by Olivia Carter's request for a more elaborate presentation. In this situation, Olivia Carter's words, though flattering, were simply a ploy to coax Jasper Carter into eating. As Olivia Carter reached for the dish, a figure darted forward, snatching her chopsticks. "This is all mine. You can't have any. I won't let you eat it." Olivia Carter, without even looking up, clapped her hands, dabbed her mouth with a napkin, and rose gracefully. Turning to Xiao Yu, she said, "Now that the young master is eating, please attend to him. After he's finished, tidy up and inform Madam." Olivia Carter's past reputation for foolishness and vulnerability was being overturned. Xiao Yu found herself increasingly impressed by the third Miss's intelligence and patient generosity. Xiao Yu murmured her assent, bowing as Olivia Carter departed. She wondered if she should offer her services to the third Miss, whom everyone considered a jinx. "What are you looking at?" "I'm eating. You should be attending me." "I'll tell Mother." Provoked by Olivia Carter, Jasper Carter suddenly found his voice, yelling at Xiao Yu, who was still watching Olivia Carter leave. Xiao Yu sighed softly, a smile spreading across her face, and turned to Jasper Carter. "Is there anything else you require, young master?" Back in her room, Olivia Carter collapsed onto her bed, utterly exhausted. Her normally straight back slumped, and she landed like a heap of mud. She'd forgotten the meager comforts afforded the third Miss, even her mattress was inferior to Jasper Carter's. The impact made her wince. Perhaps this misery would end after she married Richard Lancaster. Thoughts of Richard Lancaster brought a cascade of questions. No one had ever been so difficult to decipher. Whether there was a scheme or not, she only recognized it after the consequences unfolded. Around Richard Lancaster, she felt strangely slow-witted. Was he simply brilliant, or was she truly naive? Suspicion and resentment warred within her, but exhaustion prevailed. Constantly scheming against them, Olivia Carter needn't worry about losing weight. Such relentless effort was bound to take its toll. Olivia Carter found herself absurdly amused. Living on the edge of a knife, yet still finding humor. A peculiar sort of optimism. Her mind hazy, she drifted into sleep without realizing it. #### Chapter 25, Debate. To be precise, Olivia Carter was frozen awake. An Olivia Carter without a single maid by her side, who would care about her life or death? Olivia Carter rubbed her temples, climbed out of bed, and looked out at the completely dark sky. No one had called her for dinner. She was about to marry His Highness the Third Prince, yet she still held no status at Carter Estate. The thought alone was frustrating. Going to the dressing table, she simply tidied up her appearance. Regardless of how others viewed her, she still had to love herself. "Third Miss, Chancellor Carter requests your presence in Madam's room." Xiao Yu's voice came from outside. Olivia Carter opened the door and looked at Xiao Yu quizzically. "Why are you the one relaying the message today?" Xiao Yu smiled faintly, bowed respectfully, and said, "The head maid has assigned maids to serve Third Mississippi. Today, I have been by Third Miss's side for a while and feel that Third Miss is very approachable and kind, so I recommended myself to serve Third Mississippi. From now on, I will always be Third Miss's servant." Xiao Yu explained very thoroughly, afraid that Olivia Carter would misunderstand her. Approachable and kind. Olivia Carter found it amusing. Today, in front of Jasper Carter, she hadn't been kind at all. Although it was a bit of a departure from her previous image, everyone knew it was an act. It was rare for Xiao Yu to see through her facade so quickly. Being praised, Olivia Carter felt very satisfied. In that case, follow me to Madame's room. Unexpectedly, Miranda Nightshade's room was bustling with activity, maids and old women coming and going, everyone looking busy. Olivia Carter frowned slightly, stopping in her tracks. Xiao Yu, standing beside her, noticed Olivia Carter's hesitation and said, "I heard that Madame has ordered 2 sets of clothes from the silk shop, specially prepared for the Emperor's birthday banquet." It went without saying that one set was for Evelyn Carter and the other for Olivia Carter. Olivia Carter didn't believe Miranda Nightshade would be so kind as to prepare a suitable outfit for her. They only wished for her to lose face. But because of Chancellor Carter's orders, Miranda Nightshade couldn't neglect Olivia Carter's appearance entirely. "Has my father returned?" "Yes, he has returned and is currently in Madame's room." Xiao Yu replied respectfully. What a complete gathering. Olivia Carter steeled herself, like a hedgehog ready for battle, prepared to retaliate against anyone who attacked her. She walked towards Miranda Nightshade's room. Along the way, the maids and old women she encountered were very respectful, bowing their heads and greeting her with "Third Miss" as soon as they saw her. Olivia Carter held her head high, chest out, with Xiao Yu following behind. As soon as she entered the room, she heard gasps of astonishment from within, Miranda Nightshade's praise for Evelyn Carter after she had changed into her new attire. "Look at our Evelyn Carter, truly a natural beauty. Wearing this dress, she looks like a celestial fairy. The Crown Prince will surely adore her even more." Miranda Nightshade's confident words caused a cold smile to play on Olivia Carter's lips as she stepped into the room. Evelyn Carter wore a floor-length, strapless gown of pale yellow that accentuated her sweet, demure beauty. Her already fair skin appeared even smoother, like morning mist. Over the gown, she wore a white silk cloak, giving her an ethereal, fairy-like appearance, her movements graceful and fluid. Her hair was styled in a high bun, with 2 delicate strands framing her face, adding a touch of playfulness. They swayed gently with her every move, strangely harmonious. Miranda Nightshade had clearly put a great deal of effort into Evelyn Carter's appearance, placing all her bets on her. Miranda Nightshade's expression darkened immediately upon seeing Olivia Carter enter. Miranda Nightshade had broken out in a cold sweat that afternoon when she heard Olivia Carter had entered Jasper Carter's room. She cursed the clueless servants for not stopping the 3rd Mississippi. But when she heard that Olivia Carter had persuaded Jasper Carter to eat, Miranda Nightshade was filled with both anger and resentment. Her anger stemmed from Olivia Carter's disregard for her position as the mistress of the house, barging into her courtyard without hesitation, and the servants' failure to intervene, indicating Olivia Carter's rising influence within the household, potentially posing a threat, perhaps even surpassing Evelyn Carter. Her resentment was fueled by Jasper Carter's disobedience towards her, yet his willingness to listen to Olivia Carter and eat his meal. Miranda Nightshade felt a deep sense of injustice and jealousy, as if her son was being drawn away from her. The atmosphere in the room instantly chilled, the temperature noticeably dropping. Chancellor Carter, who had been sitting to one side, contentedly admiring Evelyn Carter's attire, now shifted his expression repeatedly as Olivia Carter entered. Initially, he hadn't wanted Olivia Carter to attend the Emperor's birthday banquet, but since the 3rd Prince had invited her, he reluctantly instructed Miranda Nightshade to prepare an outfit for her. The other maids and matrons left the room at Miranda Nightshade's signal, leaving only little Jade, a servant girl, to assist Olivia Carter with her dressing and makeup. Olivia Carter knew without a doubt that this was another deliberate attempt by Miranda Nightshade to make things difficult for her. What she found strange was Chancellor Carter's indifference, allowing the woman who had cuckolded him to do as she pleased. Was he weak, or simply unconcerned about Miranda Nightshade? His only concern seemed to be Evelyn Carter's successful marriage to the Crown Prince, solidifying his own position as Chancellor. Miranda Nightshade, fully aware of this, focused all her efforts on Evelyn Carter to secure her own and Jasper Carter's standing within the Carter estate. Olivia Carter suspected this had become an unspoken transaction between Miranda Nightshade and Chancellor Carter. As long as Evelyn Carter successfully married the Crown Prince, Chancellor Carter would overlook Miranda Nightshade's affair with Butler Darkwood, and they would maintain a fragile peace. Olivia Carter sighed. Miranda Nightshade was indeed a shrewd calculator, but whether Evelyn Carter could marry the Crown Prince remained to be seen. If they continued down the path of coercion, as they had yesterday, Olivia Carter couldn't predict her next act of defiance. "You're here." Chancellor Carter looked at Olivia Carter, offering only a cold greeting before turning back to Miranda Nightshade. Miranda Nightshade, understanding his intent, disdainfully looked Olivia Carter up and down, then reluctantly picked up a bundle from a nearby table. "Little Jade, these are the third Miss clothes. Help her dress." While Evelyn Carter's preparations required a dozen attendants, Olivia Carter had only Little Jade. At this moment, Little Jade realized third young Miss's position within Carter estate, though improved from before, ultimately remained one of being bullied. Olivia Carter, unangered, told Little Jade, "Come with me to my room." Having spoken, she turned to leave. Miranda Nightshade, displeased, sternly said, "Stop." Then, she directed a sharp gaze towards Little Jade, "Did you not hear what I just said? I told you to dress third young Mississippi." Little Jade paused, one arm clutching the bundle, the other gesturing towards the room. "Madam, here." Miranda Nightshade glared, "Are you deaf, or is your mind broken? Can you not understand such simple words?" Olivia Carter clenched her fists, knowing Miranda Nightshade was using Little Jade to scold her. Fine, if she wanted to find fault in words, today she would teach her how to speak properly. Olivia Carter turned, looked directly at Miranda Nightshade, paced a few steps, then sat beside Chancellor Carter. Miranda Nightshade, already angry, had only just calmed down after scolding Little Jade, when she saw Olivia Carter, as if nothing had happened, sit beside Chancellor Carter and look at her provocatively. "It's time to change, Olivia Carter, what are you doing?" Miranda Nightshade didn't hide the anger in her voice, her eyebrows furrowed, her face darkening, completely unbefitting of the title of Carter Estate's madam. Olivia Carter glanced curiously at Chancellor Carter beside her, wondering what about Miranda Nightshade had attracted him all those years ago, allowing her to become the second most powerful person in Carter Estate. Olivia Carter leaned back against the chair, calmly looked at Miranda Nightshade, and said indifferently, "Obeying mother, I'll watch Little Jade change here." Miranda Nightshade was taken aback. "Who said Little Jade should change?" "I said you should change." Olivia Carter, unwilling to argue, turned to Little Jade. "Little Jade, repeat what mother just said, especially the last sentence." Little Jade looked at Olivia Carter with difficulty, then glanced at Miranda Nightshade, fear evident on her face. Olivia Carter didn't force her, after all, there was still plenty of time. She wasn't in a hurry, but someone else would be. Sure enough, Chancellor Carter, sitting beside them, couldn't hold back, saying to Olivia Carter in a low voice, "What are you trying to say? Everyone hasn't had dinner yet, don't waste everyone's time." It was unclear whether this sentence was directed at Olivia Carter or Little Jade. Olivia Carter didn't react, only looked calmly at Little Jade. Miranda Nightshade seemed to understand. Today, Olivia Carter was determined to confront her to the end. She wanted to see what tricks Olivia Carter could pull without that Butler Darkwood. "Little Jade, tell me, what was the last sentence I said?" Miranda Nightshade had also given permission. Since Chancellor Carter and Miranda Nightshade had spoken, Little Jade bravely opened her mouth. "Madam just said, let this servant dress third young miss." Miranda Nightshade still didn't notice anything unusual, holding her head high, her eyes looking haughtily at Olivia Carter. But she saw Olivia Carter raise an eyebrow, completely ignoring her provocative attitude, and turn to leisurely look at Little Jade, pointing towards the inner room, her tone indifferent. "Go on, I'll wait here." "But..." Little Jade wanted to object, but when Olivia Carter's feigned stern gaze fell upon her, she finally obediently stepped into the inner room. Miranda Nightshade held out a hand to stop little Jade, her voice sharp. "Who